Okay, welcome. Welcome to Autonomous Vehicles in the City, our 9th edition. Wow, yeah, the last 9 years have gone really quickly. Thank you for coming out to the Commonwealth Club and for coming to see us here at University of San Francisco. We are thrilled to have you here. I am Billy Riggs, professor and co-director of the Autonomous Vehicles in the City initiative. We have a great lineup for you today. We're going to hear from Kristen White as our keynote speaker. We have an amazing few levels of keynote addresses from Charlotte Eisner, from Katrin Lohman, but then we actually have some deep panels on Complete Streets, on Vision Zero, but also we're going to dive deep on something that's actually really become a focal point of what we do. We're going to really go deep on transit, and on really the synergies of what we believe are the future of shared autonomy. And so I think before we go much deeper, I really want to do a thank you to some key individuals and some key sponsors that have actually made this possible and that keep, I think what I want to do is that keep our students learning. And I want to give a shout out to Waymo. They've been really critical at funding our students and doing research and keeping us on the cutting edge in terms of learning. We appreciate you. Cruise has also been a really big supporter in the past, but I think we really appreciate our partners at UC Berkeley and UC Berkeley PATH. Shout out to Scott Mora and James Fishelson. Thank you so much. They gave us our coffee out there, so thank you very much for that. Drink up. But if you didn't know, we do a lot of international work as well. And so MapTM and Space Mobility, thank you. Shout out to Xavier Tacon. Shout out to my friend Tom Malcolm. We want to say Dankjewel. We want to say, big thank you. Big merci beaucoup to both of you in the Netherlands and in Belgium. So thank you for that. We just took 26 students over to work in Belgium and the Netherlands, and they've provided sponsorship for this event as well. So we really appreciative of that as well. Let me back up a little bit because I think I really want to ground to what we do at the Autonomous Vehicles in the City initiative, because I really think it's important for you to understand how we have evolved over this last 9 years, and that it's not just this event that you're seeing here. I think it's really important that you understand that what we do in the background is not just entertaining you, that we do research. I think you've probably seen that we did a lot of work behind the scenes in understanding what was really happening on the streets with AVs as they were rolling out, and some of our work with Cruise and Waymo was really starting to understand what was happening as people were using these autonomous vehicles on the roadways. And we're putting on these events, but we're also teaching and training, and we're hosting a lot of international delegations who are wanting to know what's happening, going local to global. So I like to think that what we're doing here in San Francisco is very global. And why I think that's important is because I want to start us off today, and I think Kristen, who's going to come out here and really anchor us in that, is really anchor us in a really complex global time. And I want to say I've been thinking about our car companies, for example, today, and how complex, for example, having chips that are made from materials that come from one place in the world, that then are fabbed in another place in the world, that then are assembled in another place in the world, but then, oh my gosh, that cost increases from one country to another country, to another country, to another country. And guess what? Oh, should I say that word that starts with T that ends with FS? Oh my gosh. So you can see that we live in a very complex time, and we should acknowledge that complexity, but we should also know that we live in the most innovative global city and the most innovative global region in the world. And owning that gives us a lot of agency. And I think that's what I really want to own that and own that agency here at the Commonwealth Club and here at University of San Francisco in the teaching and the training and the events that we do here at University of San Francisco and with the partnerships that we have here. And so without further ado, I think I would like to introduce Kristen White. She's going to really, I think, what can I say more than every time I step into a room with Kristen, I am inspired. I think as a peer and as someone who I meet very too infrequently, and now as a fellow Bay Area resident, I learn something every time I talk with her. So maybe we can ask Kristen to come onto stage with a big round of applause. Kristen White.
Thank you, friend.
Google Public Service.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
So.
I paid him every cent to say that, wrote it for him. I'm going to have some slides up for us here in just a few moments, but can we just say again, hello and good afternoon. So I come from the Midwest, where when we say hello, people enthusiastically greet you with a hello. I just moved from the East Coast about a month ago, where if you say an enthusiastic hello, people will ignore you or just growl at you. And so in the Bay, I think we can do a little bit better. We are talking about a fantastic topic in the World Center of Global Innovation. So good afternoon. Good afternoon. Oh, I like that. Okay, thank you. So we're going to introduce some slides, just fewer than 10 slides, so that we can talk about what we feel today is the centering of our conversation on Google's role in global innovation and what we can talk about here at Autonomous Vehicles in the City. So I'm just going to wait for a moment as the slides to open. And first, I just want to share a little bit about my expertise and background. So while I am only a month into the Bay Area, I'm actually not new to this conversation. I just retired from about a 20-year career in the federal, state, and local sector in government innovation at the intersection of government and technological innovation. I'll tell a little bit about my story and why I feel this work is so crucial and why it was so important to move to the Bay Area, where there's thought leaders alike, including my good friend Billy, and why you are all here and very fortunate to be in the space of innovation. And I'm hoping someone can understand who authored this quote. Just shout it out. Okay, so Einstein, as he's inventing one of the world's foremost innovations of technologies and was trying to understand the unintended consequences, was trying to remind us that we cannot solve the problems with the same tools that created them. My transportation story, and I want you to think about as I give our key themes for today, what is your transportation story? I'm not in this space by accident. And in the transportation field, we know there is no such thing as an accident. We call them crashes. There's a reason for that. I am in this space because my dad at 20 years old lost my paternal grandfather in a car crash. When I was 14, a 3-person out of a 4-person family in my very small town in western South Dakota was killed in a drunk driving crash. A year later, my dad's best friend, Bob Gallant, was killed in a semi-tractor trailer crash. Today, in 2020-25, Google and our industry have technologies that would have saved every single one of those 5 people's lives, including autonomy. So we are literally talking about life-saving technology, and the reason Billy and I get so excited, and sometimes I talk too fast, is because we don't have time to lose. But we also don't have time to get it wrong. And so I want to give some ideas today on what that looks like, and Einstein and his quotation give us some framing for that. I'm always someone who likes to start with mission. Why are we doing what we're doing? Why are you here today? Why did you take time out of your busy professional and personal lives to be here? And it all starts with that vision and mission. And at Google, over almost 30 years ago, the original vision was do no evil. I think we've evolved from that. As we invented the world's foremost search engine, this was our mission. We believe that people should have democratic access to information, and it should be easy to get. And so at Google and Alphabet companies, we want to focus on our mission and our values, because it's one thing to have a vision, but But it's another thing to talk about how you're going to accomplishment, because values matter in this space, especially when we're talking about technologies that could save lives or impact them other ways. And so our mission is simply to organize the world's information, to make it useful, to make it accessible. What does that mean? Well, our values are really important to us. We want to respect the user, and to us, this is the end user. This is all of us using, whether it's transportation, which is my sector. Since I am the new Google head of transportation strategy and partnerships, I'm running the entire vertical to help us understand what transportation means to the world's fourth largest company. What strategies, what values, what mission do we need to harness autonomy and all of our vast resources? And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means here in a moment. But we also know that we have to honor the opportunity that we're here in today. As Billy noted, we've been in this space over a decade. Every day matters to technology and innovation, and we don't take it for granted. And lastly, but certainly, we want to respect each other. At Google, we have this idea that we want to debate the idea and disagree with the idea, not with the person. But we cannot have a solution without diversity of thought, without conversation today, without debate. I hope you're finding things, whether it's with me, probably not with Billy, but with the panelists that might actively disagree with us so we come to the best solution. And with that, we introduced 2 years ago what we call Google Public Sector, or Google for Government. So 2 years ago, Alphabet and Google, as corporate entities, realized as the fourth largest company in the world, we have a responsibility to give back to community, especially in the heart of the Bay Area where we were founded. I hail from Mountain View. It's actually where my dad grew up, and I'm very happy to be back in the Bay, at least in the South Bay. And we realize we have an obligation that government mission needs help more intuitively and directly from the private sector. And so Google Public Sector was founded. We're doing things in the last 2 years, for example, like using artificial intelligence to detect cancer earlier. We're using Google research, at least on the transportation side, to predict flooding and weather events 5 days in advance, which is so critical when, as I was the former federal highway administrator for the U.S. Department of Transportation last fall, those communities in Tennessee, Western North Carolina, and all parts of the South had less than 24 hours notice. Artificial intelligence and the technologies that Google and our sector develop are absolutely critical, and that's why this year we are launching Google for Transportation. And what that means is that we sit at the heart of all of the 30 companies within Alphabet. So you've heard of and probably used Gmail. You've probably done a Google search. There are 1 billion searches happening every day across the globe. You've probably seen a Waymo vehicle or taken one. You've probably used Google Earth. Maybe you used Google Maps to get here today and to park and to take transit and to do all of the things under the Alphabet umbrella. And our job at Google Public Sector, and specifically with Google for Transportation, is to harness all of these resources for the public good. And what does that mean? Well, I want to talk first about our vision and philosophy, because just like Einstein had a philosophy on how he wanted to intentionally develop and deploy technology, so do we. And so we first want to recognize that it's about the mission. In transportation, just this last year, we just in the last week saw that we now have reduced traffic fatalities, at least in the United States, from 42,000 in 2023 to 39,000 in 2024. Now, I wish we could say that's a celebration, friends, but it's not. Because people like my grandfather, the Glatter family, and Bob Glantz are still dying on our nation's roads. We have a lot of work to do, and it's not just about the safety mission, it's about resiliency and operations, which I'll touch on. But we're also really wanting to focus the conversation on human-centered design. I hope that a year from now, every one of us will understand this 6-step philosophy, because it actually started here at Stanford in the South Bay. In 1958, Stanford and their academic philosophers and researchers realized sometimes with technology, we're solving a problem that doesn't actually exist, or we're developing technology in search of a problem. But human-centered design starts with the first question and the first idea, which is empathetic inquiry. It's saying, Henriette, what is your lived experience? It's saying, Steve, what is the biggest challenge in transportation for you? It's asking, Melody, do you feel safe using the transportation system when you're trying to get home? And it's using that type of inquiry to really understand the pain points in our transportation and other systems. The second step of human-centered design, which we use at Google, very importantly, is defining and refining the problem statement. How many times have you been in a public event, a community meeting, or maybe you've even heard from talking heads like me, and we're talking about a problem and you think in your head, that's not really a problem that we need to solve. Why don't we solve something more local? Why don't you work on something more prudent for us? That's what human-centered design focuses on. And the third step, and there's many other steps which I won't share today, but the third step is ideate. It's literally whiteboarding, brainstorming the art of the possible, because sometimes we position and pigeonhole ourselves into what we think might be a solution when we're actually ignoring the entire aperture of what's out there and possible. Next, one of our philosophies is once we define that problem, we want to brilliantly solve it. And that's why we need all of you and the world's foremost technologists and innovators. And what we know is if we can't manage what we don't measure. How many times in conversations around transportation have you heard people say, what is your goal? And someone, maybe a former elected or a senior official like me might say, safety. And you're like, yeah, that's a word. What is the outcome? How many lives do we want to save? What is that metric that's going to tell us whether we're successful or whether we failed? That is what we're trying to do at Google, and I hope we have a conversation about what KPIs, those key performance indicators, are meaningful for us as a community, both globally and locally. And again, we don't lead with technology. Now, I actually started out in this sector as a Luddite, believe me or not. I did not like the smartphone, I thought technology was silly, and now I've been converted only because I can be a part of organizations that use technology to drive outcomes. And that's only because we get to respect each other and treat each other with dignity. It's sometimes very hard to do. I was only the 5th woman to lead the Federal Highway Administration. I was the youngest and the first openly queer. I had a lot of barriers ahead of me, and I hope that we can see each other truly for who we are and the value that we bring to these conversations instead of just talking past each other. Part of our philosophy is also making sure that we, as we like to say at Google, think big, act small, and stay humble. I hope in our conversations today and long in the years, we recognize all of us are experts. You are all experts in your own lived experience, in your personal lives, in your professional roles. No one who says they're an expert and ignores your opinion is someone that should be at the conversation or at the table. And if you have someone that disagrees with you on that, talk to me, because I'm a Midwesterner and I will tell you how it is. I also think, as I noted at the top, we must act with urgency. We cannot have more stories like mine where people's lives are lost. We cannot have more lives impacted. Today starts now. We have to be transparent, which Google is trying to do, being an open source platform company, and we want to have a healthy disregard for the impossible. Too many times in conversations, and again, I'm a recovering lawyer, as I like to say. I used to manage risk at the federal government as chief counsel and as counsel in state governments. And instead of saying no, I think we should harness the art of the possible that risk can provide. And I like this word about staying scrappy. So with that, I want to have fun for the rest of the conversation as I introduce our key themes for today, and then just introduce at a very high level, before it's public, Google for Transportation and our 5 strategies. So for the rest of the conversation, and even just in your own life, I want you to think about 4 key things. First is, what is your story? What is your story in life? What is your transportation story? I shared just a very small snippet of my life and why I'm so freaking passionate about transportation. But too often we don't take time to say, hey, Billy, how did you get into transportation? Or why are you here today? What interests you? What is your transportation story? My friend and colleague, behavioral artist Marcus Young out of St. Paul, Minnesota, developed this, and we would host workshops across the Midwest, where we would first start with centering ourselves with a breathing exercise, because we have to be present. And I want to thank you all, by the way, right now, for being present and engaged. And then the second thing we would ask is, with your transportation story, what's the first time you remember getting in a car, taking a bus, getting on your first airplane ride? For me, part of my transportation story were the lives lost that really impacted my family, my community. But part of my transportation story was when I graduated from college and moved to Japan, taking my first international trip and watching from SFO Airport the California coastline get smaller and smaller in that window on the plane, and starting to realize in a hyperventilating incident, I had actually decided to leave America for a land I didn't even know the language. And seated next to me was Akiko-san and her love. And they started to talk to me in broken English and broken Japanese between the two of us. And when we got to Narita Airport, the world's largest airport in a Tokyo city of 33 million, she and her partner walked me to the kiosk. I'd never taken public transportation in my life. They showed me the Japanese Chikatetsu map, which if you have not seen it, please Google it when we're done. It's a beautiful piece of art. They helped me understand how to convert yen, my dollars to yen, get a subway token, and then they took the hour-long ride with me to my destination to make sure I arrived safely. Friends, that is the story we are doing in transportation. We bring people home safe. What is your story? Second is, why does Google care? We should. We're the 4th largest company. We're in the news. We have resources. We have people that work for us. We know you need to partner with us, and we must partner with you to save lives, which is why over the last 3 months, I went through all of Google's research databases, poured over all of our 400 plus transportation applications, from autonomy to artificial intelligence, and we have a 5-point strategy to help make sure we're going to figure out over the next 3 years how we help this conversation and how we don't hurt it. Third is, I think it's very important for us to recognize we cannot do this alone. It takes the public, it takes private sector, it takes technologists, it takes elected officials, it takes academics, it takes innovators, it takes bright minds. As Steve Jobs used to say, it takes the square peg and the round hole to make sure that all of us are innovators together. And for Google, that means growing our partner network. We know we only play one piece in that very large puzzle, and I hope you together fill in that puzzle map to do this work with us. And lastly, as Billy reminded us, what is both global is local and what is local is global. What you are seeing on the city streets here in San Francisco at intersections where Waymo or other vehicles are trying to navigate the world just as we are safely, the world is watching. And while I don't necessarily want to talk a lot about what's happening in Washington, D.C., there is a reason, my friends, I flew from that area and I'm very happy to be in the Bay. What we're seeing is 2 things. One is that our federal government is trying to shrink its footprint in the federal space, which means that all of us at the state and local level, as citizens, have more responsibility to deliver on the promise of transportation safety. And it also means that we have an opportunity to innovate. This federal government wants us to bring our best ideas to the table, and it's not just me, it's not just Google doing that, it's all of you and your ideas with us together. So with that, I briefly want to introduce Google for Transportation. This is a very early preview, and I'm very excited later this spring more will come. And then I'll close with some ideas before you hear from a really esteemed panel that I can't wait to learn from. First is a reminder to tell your story. What is your story? Why are you here? And why does it matter? Too often you see headlines with stats and data and numbers, and you see just maybe a 140-character snippet. That is not you. That is not your story. There is a reason we are in this space together. I want you to figure out over the next month or year how you can tell your story as to why this work matters. Autonomy and innovation and artificial intelligence is transforming our lives. Is it helping your story? 2 is we're going to change the way we talk. At Google, I can assure you there are millions of acronyms, and as a Noogler, that's one of them, it's a new Googler, there you go, I know maybe 1% of them. And what I'm encouraging us is to use what is called plain language, both in Google and in our industry and with you all. Plain language in America is defined as someone with a 7th grade reading level. That is middle school. If I cannot talk about this work to someone who is in 7th grade, I have lost. We have lost the conversation. We have literally lost lives because we're using tech jargon or acronyms. So today I challenge us all, avoid the acronyms, spell it out, and try to speak meaningfully. Third is we want to grow our partner network. Are you someone who thinks you can bring ideas to Google? Do you think that you need to partner with us so that we can scale your work? Google knows we can't go it alone. And we also know that in the transportation sector, there are trusted partners with our government agencies that we need to build that bridge to work with together. So I encourage you to reach out to me if you're interested in joining our partner network. Fourth is we are going to be infusing human-centered design in our work. So for the first 3 months of this year, I've been traveling across the country hosting what we call innovation workshops in the human-centered design space, where we literally just get a whiteboard out and we go to tables or we go outside and we have Post-its and we talk about what is the problem we're trying to solve? What are your ideas and how can Google help? And we come up with really cool ideas and use cases on them. And last, I'm going to share in my last 2 slides what some of those use cases are. Now, again, this is going to be coming later this year, but I can give a few hints as to what they are. First, starting and always ending with safety. So here in the state of California, we're previewing a new artificial intelligence tool that can actually use historic analytics, so historic crash data, understand where crashes are occurring in real time, and then predict where they're going to be going, map them and heat map them, and then directly partner with law enforcement so we can redeploy emergency responders 8 to 11 minutes faster. Now, friends, in 2023, 42% of the 42,000 lives lost in America on our roads were alive in the first 2 minutes. This artificial intelligence, autonomy systems can save lives. The other things we're going to be looking at work zones. You know, in the Midwest, we talked about several seasons. We had winter, we had summer, and then we had construction season. Now, here we know what those red barrels indicate, and it's really hard to navigate them. We know both as pedestrians and people biking and people in transit and cars. So we have new artificial intelligence applications that can help us understand where those are to keep us and everyone around us safe. And resiliency is very, very important. For someone who had to represent the administration with the 240 plus lives that were lost in the Hurricane Helene impacted American South, this is very important to me. Weather impacts our lives, regardless if you want to admit that climate change is a thing, which, by the way, it is. So at Google, we're looking at, again, the Google research I noted that's going to advance weather prediction, but then that is going to help us plan for emergency evacuation, routing, dynamic real-time information so that states like Hawaii and Los Angeles during the wildfires, we help them directly figure out how to reroute people so they could stay safe. The third priority of use cases is operations. 46% of the budgets of all federal, state, and local agencies in transportation are spent on maintaining the roads and bike lanes and everything that we've built to keep it safe. So we have artificial intelligence and autonomous systems that understand and map out the assets across the system and help us understand with vision intelligence, with video detection, where there might be failures or where we need to send people out to keep them safe. In Wired Magazine, just last month, they mentioned our MTA in New York City example, where we are using autonomous technologies, artificial intelligence, and Pixel phones to understand where in the largest system in the world the subway tracks need to be maintained to both help the workers, you as users, and the system. And fourth, it takes a lot of planning. Kudos to our friends in the city of San Francisco, who I'd like to think, I might be biased, are world experts. But this is just a conversation about the here and now. As Einstein reminds us, we need to think about the years 4 years out, 10 years out, and 20 years out. And our technology can help plan where these systems are going to go and how we need to work with them to plan for a future. So with that, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for engagement and presence, and I just want to offer you this. I am a huge fan of literature. I think it's very important that we acknowledge the arts as we also acknowledge STEM education. And for me, Mark Twain is someone who's very critical to my learning as a young girl in Midwest, in America, and South Dakota. And he reminds us of this adage. He says that the 2 most important days you were born, or days of your life, are the day you were born and the day you find out why. I found out my why when I was impacted as a young girl with people who lost and were left from my life because of transportation safety crashes. I hope throughout today and the rest of our lives and our work together that you find out your why too. Thank you.
I really have the honor of extending that. And so now we're going to dive deep and local with a panel on complete streets and green streets. So we're going to get technical and very local. So if I could just have my next panel come out. We're going to have Anurag Pandey, Scott Mora, and Cindy Zerger come up. And we're gonna go deep now. So welcome. Really appreciate you all being here. I think what I'd like to do is just start us off with you all just telling us a little bit about who you are. But before you do that, I actually wanted to start off with just a little bit of kind of an introduction of our topic. And so when I was thinking of us doing this and I was reaching out to you all, this is a little grounded in knowing a little bit about what Kristen was going to talk about, and kind of, I don't think she totally knew that, but also kind of tearing off of some work that Molly Cohen-DiGostingo, who's here in the audience, and UC Davis and University of San Francisco have been working on cooking up some research for the last year. We've been focused a lot on kind of talking to experts about, what's going on with AVs and what's going on, and talking about like our language about automation in the streets, and really thinking about like, what is this vision for future streets? And let me tell you, there's a lot of opinions and there's a lot of perceptions. And so, I can tell you all, I've heard a lot of opinions, and we have a lot of perceptions of what's going on around on the street. And I think, has anybody read a lot of behavioral economists say what's wrong with human perception? What do you all think? What's wrong with human perception? It's usually right on, right?
I mean, I'm thinking of Daniel Kahneman.
Yeah. So what would Daniel Kahneman say about human perception?
Yeah, how people tend to react with their lizard brain, right?
Yes.
And is separate from sort of this more logical thought process.
Yeah, so, what we're finding is there's some predictably irrational responses, even from the experts, in terms of perceptions of traffic and perceptions of rational behavior at the curb. So even the experts think that some of the Waymo behaviors at the curb are more irrational than they really are. So it's interesting. Or, we can say Waymo, or we can, it's AV behavior at the curb is more irrational, or pulling over behavior. So it's like, there's sustainability, there's kind of all these interactions happening at the curb, and there's stuff happening that I think it's worth discussing. But at the end of the day, I think one of the things that Molly and I are starting to kind of gnaw on is that we have this issue that's really prevalent that we're starting to pull out as researchers and as academics. And I think one of the things that we're starting to pull out, and we're trying to pull this out, and we've been working on it for the last year, is this. And I wanted to kind of pull out this graphic that's we're kind of trying to gnaw on as a report that we've been working on. And this kind of is some research we're trying to get out. It's really kind of premature, but this top line is something that I wanted to share, and I told you about this before, is this idea of we're really seeing experts, when they're honest with themselves, say, hey, there's not a lot of space available. And when you look at some of the quotes of what the experts say, and when they're honest, they ask this question: should we be storing cars on the street? And it goes back to this idea of how do we value urban real estate? And so this idea of this panel goes back to kind of, we're coming up on Earth Week. We're coming up on kind of this idea of really questioning our climate goals. We have these Vision Zero goals in San Francisco, and we have our next speakers from Stockholm. Stockholm, kind of has been the champion of Vision Zero, right? Wasn't it? So, how can we have these AV goals in parallel with climate and equity and Vision Zero goals? And so, I'll stop there, and maybe we can start with some introductions, and maybe this can be our first kind of jumping off point. Anurag, you want to start us off?
All right. So I'm Anurag Pandey. I'm professor of civil engineering at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, former colleague of Billy. My area is transportation safety, and what Kristen was talking about, the first idea around safety that Google has, sort of these real-time traffic crash prediction. That was my dissertation long time ago.
Not too ago.
Right. It was very long ago. I'm not going to say which year, but a long time ago. And so I work from this transportation safety collision data analysis. I've done some sort of geometric design and how roadway design affects user behavior. I'm a member of the performance effects of geometric design committee at TRB. And I also chair the ASCE, American Society of Civil Engineers, to define the acronym here. Transportation and Development Institute, they have a safety committee, and chair that committee. And one of the things that I do in my role as an academic, we look at all these federal standards that come out, and one of the things that I was just recently doing is that they made some modifications to the Okay, I'm going to say the name, MUTCDE.
No,
right?
it's an acronym.
Right.
Violation.
Right.
Say the full name.
I know. Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices. I know it.
Lord
you can't
Almighty.
test me on that.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, so
Can we define what the MUTCD is?
Yes, that's what I was going to do now. It's a manual that controls how we put in these traffic signals and signs and temporary traffic control for work zones and all of that. What do engineers need manuals? Let's just say that, right? So that's one of them. And I was just
It's a book.
It's a book, yeah, online. But it's a book nevertheless.
It's a PDF.
Right. So we were just trying to provide some feedback on, temporary traffic control. And I was shocked that they have no mention of collaborating. They have something about the media, alerting the media, but they have no mention of collaborating with Google, for example. So I think why am I here is basically kind of where do engineers fit into this, right? So what do I teach my engineering students about automation, about automated vehicles, and what do they need to know to make sure that the design that we provide, the curbside or on the street or the crosswalks and the naked streets, the edge lane roads or the right turn on red, whatever infrastructure we are thinking about, how does that interact with human drivers, but then at the same time when you have automated vehicles. So that's why I'm here for. That's what I'm here for. I'm mostly here to learn. I think I don't know if I have a lot of answers, but it's a very exciting time for us because the profession is changing, and I'm here to learn. So that's my story.
Cool. I'll go next. My name's Scott Mora. First, welcome everybody. It's great to be with you. I'm a professor of civil environmental engineering at the University of California, Berkeley. And I'm going to follow Kristen's lead and tell you my transportation story. So I grew up in Los Angeles, and as a kid, I have all these memories of sitting on the highway, in traffic, not moving. And growing up, there were a number of times as a kid in elementary school where recess was canceled because of air quality. That was just a normal way of life growing up. And so I got very excited about alternative fuel vehicles, was the term of the time when I was in college and thinking about grad school. So now I'm a professor at University of California, Berkeley, and the research we do largely has to do with decarbonization of transportation. I also direct Research Center PATH, one of the sponsors of the event, Partnerships for Advanced Transportation Technologies. And our biggest initiative at the moment that I'd like to share with everybody is we are building out what we call the Innovative Mobility Hub. It's a facility in Richmond where we're looking for partners. And if you're interested in just office space at quite low cost, if you're interested in testing facilities to test your vehicles or other technologies, if you're interested in gaining access to the world's best talent, our students and our researchers, some of which are here in the audience, and of course us, the faculty and our researchers, we would really love to partner. So that's me.
And I know Scott, because he had a cool acronym for one of his research projects when I left Berkeley. You want to say the acronym?
Yeah, so what Billy is referring to is a project we call SLERP EV, Smart Learning Research Pilot for Electric Vehicles. I was trying to find some artists who could get like a nice little image of like a car from Pixar Cars, like slurping electrons or something like that. That would have been really cool. But it's basically a next generation of EV charging station where the key thing is to incorporate human behavior in the loop. So largely with our transportation, with our infrastructure, period, and engineers, we often don't do enough to consider humans. Yeah. Kristen talked about human design. So that's what makes it unique, is considering and learning human behavior.
Yeah, we were talking about this before. Let's come back to that, because you and Cindy were getting into this when we were talking before. So I want to come back to this human-centered design and SLERP and design at the curb. So Cindy.
Well, great. Thanks. Wonderful to be here. I'm Cindy Zerger. I am a public space designer and landscape architect, and I work as an urban designer. I lead our urban design team at Tool Design Group. And Tool is really a firm that has really specialized in the space of community vitality and mobility. And as a firm, our real mission, actually, I should say, I think we might be the only transportation firm with the word joy in its mission. So it's about transportation is more than just moving vehicles, is really our perspective. And in terms of my career and maybe my why is that I think our public spaces and our streets, frankly, are the largest part of our public space in a given city, and the demands in that space are so critical, and they do more than just move people. And so I have focused on projects, everything from research with FHWA on shared streets to complete streets initiatives. But my passion is really about designing our streets, designing and implementing. So getting to the point of where we're rethinking, we're retrofitting a lot of our streets here in the U.S. And so that's really where my passion lies. I also like to once in a while tell folks or introduce myself as a parking mitigation specialist. So we have a lot of opportunity to think about what that space that we devote to parking, the free cars storage, really can be. So I am also here to learn and to hopefully dialogue a lot on this change, this transition. I think we're at a really pivotal point in our history. So excited to be here.
Yeah, my identity for you is always as you as a cyclist for some reason. So I feel like that's a certain portion of your transportation story too.
Yeah, that's definitely a part of it. I actually love to bike throughout the country as a recreational cyclist, but also certainly for commuting. And actually, it's where I came up with a term that I like to use in terms of reframing how we talk about our streets, which is the idea of path as place. And this came to me as I was riding on a trail. And if I can keep going with this, a funny little detail that we have on our Minneapolis park space in the Twin Cities where I'm from, a trail that has a flush ribbon curb. And this little detail is super important from a structural standpoint. It keeps the asphalt from eroding, but it really formalized that experience of living on being on a trail. And when we are not on that trail, it doesn't feel the same. And so I hope we can bring that same intention, that attention to detail in our transportation system about experiencing, just as we do our places, the places that we know and love, we should design our streets the same way.
That's amazing. You betcha.
You betcha.
Sorry, I had to. Okay, well, so maybe just to kind of focus on the detail, attention to detail. Anurag, I'm gonna brag on you. So Anurag published dropped a little paper a little while back with one of our AV in the City friends, Bruce Appleyard, and our other friends with the Mineta Transportation Institute on right turn on red, and kind of this kind of thing that's in San Francisco been a little controversial of late, but just an interesting topic, and. But we were talking before, this idea of safe systems approach and kind of what are the detailed things that we should do now, or irrespective of autonomous vehicles, what's kind of what should we do in cities, the detailed things that we should do for green streets, for safe streets, for safe, slow, and sustainable streets. Scott, for AVs, for EVs, for Cindy for landscape and urban design. What should we be doing, irrespective of modes, on our streets?
Yeah. So I'll just talk a little bit about that project with Bruce Appleyard at San Diego State and funded by Mineta Transportation Institute at San Jose State. And the idea of that project was basically, it came from the fact it was California legislature had asked us to do that study. And the idea was that right now, if you're a city community wants to do something on your intersections, for example, your signalized intersection, you want to ban right turn on red, you got to put up signs on each intersection. And that becomes cost prohibitive. I think this is something that San Francisco SFMTA wrote in its memo that, hey, we can't put up signs at all these intersections, even if we want to prohibit right turn on red in that whole zone. So the project basically started out by thinking, okay, what kind of policy can we make that would, allow cities to do this? And certainly, it's contextual. It depends on the context where you can prohibit it, where you shouldn't prohibit it. But right now the policy is basically you have to put up signs, and that's not ideal. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to see if we can show in the data that this is something that's consistent, like trying to prohibit right turn on red is consistent with the safe systems approach. And this is the idea, right? Autonomy, no autonomy, whatever we are doing, I think we should be doing things that are consistent with the safe systems approach. And now what is the safe systems approach? It's about, people are going to make mistakes, and it's something that you do not want to wait for the collisions to happen, crashes to happen to take care of them, because for the longest time, our safety approach has been hotspot driven. Wherever we see crashes, we chase our tail and go try to fix that location, right? That's not what we want to do. We want to look at, okay, what trends are we seeing? Where would we be in the near future if we did not fix things? And one of the things that we learned in that project was our vehicle fleet size has grown so much. Now we have like 70 to 80% of new cars sold are SUVs, as opposed to 50% like almost 10 years ago. And right alongside that, what we saw is that these right turn collisions, right, they are more fatal. They're becoming, for every fatality now, the fatality rate has doubled. For every collision that happens on right turns, the fatality rate of those collisions have doubled. So what does that tell us? That tells us that as we are probably as we are growing in size and maybe growing in vehicle weight, again, that has to be looked at by the geometry. But what you're seeing is that as the vehicle weight grows, you're making these crashes more severe.
Okay. Maybe I'll just then put the elephant in the room. We have these 6,000-pound killing machines, Scott. Do we need to reduce speeds on local roads?
That's the answer.
What should speeds on local roads be, and should they be regulated at the state level? Let's just be blunt. We're academics. We can say whatever we want.
Can we?
Yeah, I mean you're tenured, right?
Yeah, luckily there's safety in the state of California when it comes to being tenured. But no, I mean there's a lot of research and evidence that quite simply reducing speeds does a lot to save lives. So that's a huge lever, no question about it.
Yeah.
I just want to add to that. In order to do it, I think what we really need to get beyond is the signage, right? I mean, we have to be thinking about the design interventions that really help us slow speeds. We talk a lot about it in terms of vertical friction. So from a visibility perspective, we're getting everyone to behave a little bit better by what we add to the street that actually creates texture or visual perception. So you just naturally, as a person driving, you're slowing. I think one of the things that we really need to do is start to get everyone, we were just talking about this back there, is get everyone to start sort of moving at the same speed almost, especially in our urban conditions. It's right now we have such a differential so that when you do have the collision, it's oftentimes a really devastating one.
Yeah, I mean, I was on a Vision Zero panel that the Vision Zero Networks and Zoox put on last year, and they asked me what's the number one policy that cities could do tomorrow, and I said it was 20 is plenty, which is I think it's just the easiest lever to pull, but I like the direction you're going to, Cindy, which is that's a policy intervention, but the direction too is what are physical design interventions. So then when we think about physical design, that gets at the green streets, complete streets, because the vehicle is one thing. And when we think about infrastructure, what does that mean when we think about the multimodal future? Because I think that's when we were preparing for this, I think where we started to get stuck was, we can't just think about cars, right? Because we started to get stuck because nobody here on stage actually is an automotive commuter. None of us actually commute via vehicle, which is it's provocative. I take transit.
Yeah,
you
I
via
take the
bike.
ride. Yeah,
you
I
commute
ride the
via
bike.
bike, and
I actually do drive because
you do
I
drive,
live
okay.
on
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Marin side and I have to go over to Oakland, but
Yeah,
I'm
so-
also at home.
Yeah.
I have not made the, it would be a 60
no,
commute.
we can all be honest. Yeah, like
Yeah.
And
But
Scott owns an EV. I own an EV too, but like
Same.
most of the time I take transit. So
Yeah, let me say, or I want to highlight something a little different about speed on streets in
Yeah,
cities.
okay, go
right?
ahead.
So this event is themed on cities, but we should consider rural communities as
Yeah.
well. And something that PATH has gotten into is freight movement in rural
Yeah.
communities, particularly along I-40. The number of crashes and deaths is disproportionately high with heavy-duty trucks through rural communities. And actually, there's a lot that just simple technology can do in understanding the environment and speed limiting. There's a lot of opportunity
Yeah.
to save lives, just even with simple connectivity.
yeah, maybe I hope that's something. I don't know if either Charlotte or Catherine can touch on any of that with kind of either of their talks. But I think there's a lot that the industry potentially could talk about in terms of business cases or product market fit. But there's really a lot of potential use cases there. So, but maybe let's go back. Sorry, Cindy, go.
No, you go for it. Okay.
No, I was going to circle us back to where you were.
Yeah, I think also, you asked a bit about, what are the things we need to do to address the safety issue on our streets from a physical standpoint. And I think also beyond that, we have to think about, again, the role of streets in our communities is about social and economic exchange. First and foremost, the convening of our cities is about that exchange and the role that they play, and also thinking about how people experience it from a accessibility perspective. So people with mobility challenges. If I were to say there's two things, I think we talk about often fixed use and flexible use of curb space of different parts of our environment. And if I were to say there's some fixed uses that I'd like to see in like all of the work that we do in terms of street design, it is a fully accessible pedestrian area that is really, really critical, I think, to addressing the safety within our streets. And that includes crossings. I was just crossing over here, actually. I have a great picture of a Waymo up in the crosswalk, and then a second car that came up and posed that double threat to me as I was crossing across. I'll send you the photo. It's pretty wild that it happened on my way over here. But so thinking about that really accessible pedestrian route, and that should be fixed. That should be something that's just standard in our rural communities as well. We cannot be doing this on shoulders or not including sidewalks in our environment. And then, to really address the climate crisis, we have this opportunity in a lot of our streets. And if we rethink our parking, if we rethink what we're really allocating in terms of vehicle space, that should be just green infrastructure everywhere. We need to think about, we have an incredible issue right now with urban heat island index. They're higher than they ever have been, and how we introduce tree canopy in that is really pretty critical. And the role of managing stormwater, that's really what I think our streets need to do a better job of. And I think the AV conversation, and where I hope we get with some of this, and I'll learn this afternoon, is how are we really repurposing? How does that present this opportunity to really repurpose that space in a full, a good way?
For Scott and Anurag, how is the engineering discipline thinking about stormwater and charging in the same context?
Stormwater and
Stormwater management and vehicle charging in the same context.
in the same context, in the same.
I mean, they're happening in the same. You would have to do it in the same location.
Yeah, maybe I can come at it from the EV angle.
Yeah, come at it from the.
That's my jam. Yeah, curb space for EV charging. Let's talk about that just for a second. First, let me ask the audience: how many of you who own a vehicle, how many have off-street parking at home for your car? Okay, I'm more interested. How many of you don't have off-street parking for your car? Okay, I see a chunk of people in the audience. How many of you, even if you have off-street parking, you don't have a plug near where you park your car? Don't have a plug near where you park your car. Do not have a plug. Yeah? Okay, there's a chunk. Something like 1/6 of Americans don't have that. So there's this idea of let's use curb space for EV charging too. We're storing cars, let's charge them as well. Meanwhile, we need to discharge, stormwater, which is to your question. A lot of people are quite excited about curbside charging. I'll give a hot take. I'm not excited about it in the sense that curbs are valuable spaces, right? And people want to charge where they store their car. You might be competing with other purposes as well. There's a lot of room for innovation here. And how do we fuel these zero-emission vehicles? And competing with curb space, I think we want to be thoughtful about it so it doesn't conflict with stormwater and so forth.
Car storage is complicated too because it competes with other uses. And so a lot of people store their car on the curb because they want to use their, sorry for all of you that raise their hand because they have curbside
I'm
car
in that
storage
category too.
But because a lot of people in California use their garage for other purposes. And it's used for storage of all those boxes and bikes and other toys they have or things like that, or the third bedroom. Which is fine, or they don't have a garage, or but what's interesting thing that's happening, and we learned this, we were talking with the City of Oakland last week, and it's interesting, City of Oakland is incentivizing reduced parking. They think they're great, great new housing. We're reducing our parking incentives. It's like negative parking. But then they're basically not reducing any of the on-street parking, and then they're actually surveying the residents, and the residents still all have cars. Guess where they're parking their cars? All on streets. So they're basically exasperating their on-street parking issues because nobody is car shedding. They're all just actually exasperating on-street parking issues, and there's no in-unit parking. It's counterintuitive because it's not doing the policy is not doing what it's supposed to be doing. I don't know.
Yeah, one thing that I for whatever work we are doing around reducing parking, I think ultimately we want to reduce the VMT, right?
Yeah.
The vehicle mile travel. Are we reducing that in some ways? If it's the AV technology, can we design or can we think of that technology as to ultimately drive down the use of private automobile, right?
Yeah.
Because this is important from a climate perspective. Definitely very important in the U.S. from a safety perspective, right? We talk about, human drivers, all making mistakes and whatnot. But I think of that as the problem is not necessarily the humans are necessarily bad drivers. Because if you look at the number of fatalities, right, per 100 million vehicle miles traveled, it's like 1.5. So this number is actually pretty low. And if you take a trained school bus driver, that number is like 0.2. So I don't think it's the human driver problem per se. I think the problem is we just drive too damn much, I think. That's what we need to do. We need to reduce whatever technologies we are coming up with, if it's automated technology or if you're reducing parking in houses, if it's not reducing VMT, I don't think it's doing its job. It's not getting us to the goals.
Well, so maybe this is kind of the role that kind of we go to in terms of shared automation. And then kind of if we think about this vision for, and this is going to be a little bit of a surprise, I think, question because we didn't really talk about it. If we think about this goal for shared automation, if this is an assumption we make, kind of how do we build in this? What do we do at the curb to build in this goal for shared automation? What do we prioritize at the curb to facilitate the future of shared automation? What's your vision for that?
Well, I think the curb, right now we have allocation for, again, I think green infrastructure should be part of it, but it doesn't have to be the whole length of a street, for example, or a block. But we have areas where a robust pull-out is the pricing of our curb and the dynamic nature of it. So how we're managing it over time during the day, I think is something that we really need to rethink. We do a lot of this in our work, which is talking about curbside management. We do a ton of numbers. We crunch them. We understand how many parking spaces there are, what the time frames are for parking, and a lot of times those spaces are not being used at different times of the day. I think there's a whole lot more flexibility in terms of what our curbs could do if we think about it, about managing that more from from a policy where there's flexibility in bus stops, for example. It's not just for the buses. I know we need to prioritize them, but could that also be pick up and drop off for other uses or for other companies?
So
I
using
guess.
those red zones more
Yeah,
actively.
more effectively.
Any other ideas, thoughts? Anurag?
Well, I mean, Cindy said it. I mean, I agree with that. What was said here. So,
Yeah.
I think.
If I may, I want to spin back to something Anurag
Yeah,
was
yeah,
saying.
yeah.
So I want to make this soup spicy now. Okay?
So, okay, make the soup
let's
spicy.
Make it spicy. I don't know that the goal is to reduce VMT. I think we need to think carefully about this, right? Because moving goods, ton miles,
Okay.
is important. It's a measure of the economy. Moving people miles, is a measure of the economy, right? So VMT may not itself be the measure. We talked about outcomes. How do we measure
Yeah.
outcomes? It's emissions, it's energy, it's time, congestion. So I want to spice up this soup by saying, I think transportation authorities, cities need more thoughtful metrics than VMT.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about electrification also. So we might have VMT that isn't causing as much greenhouse gas emissions. So I would challenge people to think carefully about that. Go to fundamentals. We want to move people. We want to move goods over time. We don't want congestion. We don't want too much energy. We don't want too much emission.
I use this term people miles traveled quite a lot too. Okay, we are almost out of time, so I'm going to give each of you your final word, and it can be a drop the mic sentence, or it can be just a final word of wisdom to impart to the students. But Cindy, you're up.
Oh gosh. Well, I wanted to make it extra spicy because I also wonder if the best solution to some of our transportations are better land use decisions. And I think that's, yes, we all fundamentally know it comes down to not moving people, but actually having them be able to access things that are a lot more closer to where they need to be. Gosh, you really put me on the spot. I think I would encourage students, people who are heading into the mobility space, the transportation space, to really think more holistically about, again, what our transportation system needs to do. What are the co-benefits we can be thinking about in these spaces? How do we bring joy into this conversation? We so often put this efficiency equation into our work or into the transportation space, and sometimes I just really don't think it's about efficiency. And it's more about enjoyment.
Yeah, my closing thought is, I think, particularly for those that are early in their career in transportation, is there's an elephant in the room that is emerging that we need to recognize, and it's the onset of AI, okay? And traditionally, as engineers, you're trained in the laws of physics, F equals ma, Navier-Stokes equations, Young's modulus, these things, right? Meanwhile, we have to design for humans. And I think AI gives us tools to understand human interaction and how to interact with humans. I'd even argue that maybe Waymo isn't strictly trying to move people from A to B, but there might be some data collection and AI models that they might be trying to generate. I don't know, my own suspicion. I think we need to rethink engineering and solutions in the lens of how can we solve these most urgent problems of moving people safely and leverage some of the new tools at our disposal like AI. And at Berkeley, we're certainly leading with that.
Yeah, great question. And we have a data institute where we're doing the same thing too, and I think Michael will talk a little bit about that at the end.
So my closing thought is that, what we have learned in traffic safety sometimes, especially in these urban environments, sometimes less can be more, like, sort of these naked streets or fewer signage, removal of traffic signals, these things could be more. And whatever automation technologies we come up with, it shouldn't impede with that work. It should somehow, these technologies should be compatible with what we might be doing with our streets and green streets, slowing down our streets. If we can keep that compatible, I think we can make some progress.
Okay, so thank you very much. Those final words were not that at all, Cindy. You did amazing. So we are running a little behind, so I know I got a couple questions, but we'll try to fold those in throughout the day. But I want to say thank you. This was outstanding. Thank you all for the attention, but give them a hand. They'll be around, and we're going to have coffee later. Thank you, Anurag. Scott, it was a pleasure. Cindy. So we're going to do a little stage shuffle, but while we do that, I'm going to it is my pleasure to welcome our next speaker, Charlotte Eisner, and it's actually a big deal because she made quite a journey to be here today. So welcome Charlotte Eisner, all the way from Stockholm. Charlotte is here all the way, ex-Zeekr, I think kind of serial entrepreneur, and she'll tell us a little bit about her kind of personal and professional journey through a series of slides. But I got to know Charlotte a couple years ago, but we spent quite a bit of time.
Ask me about EV charging, and I have so many things I want to talk to both Scott and you, Kristen, and Cindy about later.
Okay, so they'll be around,
yes.
but Charlotte has a couple slides, but we're going to sit down, and there's some water here for you.
Lovely.
But let's take a seat and have a little chat.
Perfect.
So, but why don't you introduce yourself for a little bit?
And I just want to make sure everyone is awake. I will talk about sex and money.
Yeah, we're all ready for this. Everybody ready? We've got a European in the house.
Exactly. I'm from Sweden.
Are you going to sing some ABBA, right?
Exactly.
Money, money, money.
Exactly, and give me a man after midnight.
After midnight, okay, we're good.
I was so happy you showed this at your start about having sex in the robo-taxis. It's actually a use case that we've been working on, especially for China and Japan, and I will come back to that. I was also thinking when I was talking back in Sweden about this event.
Well, it's a rich woman's world, though.
It's a rich man's world. Yeah, I was definitely telling my colleagues and friends that I was visiting a symposium called AVs and the City, and they said, "What, Sex and the City?" And I was, "No, AVs and the City. You know what I'm working with?" And yeah, but you do so many hot things all the time. So I was actually starting to think, should I perform like Miranda or Samantha or Carrie? But I decided to come as Charlotte. And thank you, Kristen, for bringing up the why. I have two big whys. One is super obvious. I'm a mother of 4 kids. I want them to live a long, safe, and healthy life on a planet that is also safe and healthy. But I also realized that the real why from way back in my life, it's really irony in a sense. So my grandfather escaped the Second World War from a tiny village in Austria with my grandmother, and they actually had to leave my dad behind. He was born on May 5th, 1945, and for everyone who remembers when the war ended, that was about that time. So he was brought to Sweden. He was a really good, talented engineer. And he joined a team at Volvo Cars to develop the safety belt. And that was, of course, something amazing. And I guess most of you know that Volvo decided to open up that patent for the better of man. So safety when driving is a big thing to me. And irony. My grandparents, when I was 4 years old, went on a road trip back to Austria, where they finally found out that there were some things left for them to inherit from their relatives. And on the way back, driving, and I think I may end up in a discussion with your next speaker afterwards, driving back in a Volkswagen minibus with no safety belt. They were hit by a truck from behind. The driver fell asleep in the big truck, and my grandfather died. Grandmother survived, but all my life I grew up with my grandmother living in our house, and she was never the same. Too many losses. So I think that is, to me, the original story. And then my 4 kids just came along, and of course I want the best for them. this little guy, it's not mine. My kids are much older. But for me, it's really, really important to be able to do something to truly democratize mobility, to provide mobility for those who are less fortunate with money or health, the younger and the really old ones. And I am here to talk about the car. I will be very physical. I was introducing myself that way before. So I will be very practical and sort of tactile, and also talk a little bit about business cases. But to democratize mobility for all, and for sure make it safe and available. And I was happy and lucky enough to work in a Geely company. Geely owns Volvo Cars, the Swedish, safe car company. And Waymo made the very wise choice to collaborate with the engineering teams from Volvo Cars, but also Saab Automotive, to develop a purpose-built vehicle for their robo-driver. And I think it's been too little talk about the importance of the vehicle. Especially here in San Francisco, you're very good at the techie stuff, and everyone talks about the autonomous drive systems a lot. And even in those companies, they tend to forget that to have a partner to that AD tech that dances along in a perfect way is super important. And for all those city planners and everyone that has to do with people, I think it's very obvious to you that when a customer gets into a car, it's not really the autonomous drive technology that they experience, but it's actually the vehicle. If you feel safe in that vehicle, it will be a good experience. And then, of course, the driver needs to be smooth and all this as well. But I was working on that vehicle as the VP for business development, and I was happy enough to be able to present it first time more than 2 years ago in Los Angeles. And I guess some of you now has seen, I think we have 10 of them running in San Francisco with engineering teams to be trimmed and ready to go. Let's move on. So to be a little bit of a vehicle nerd now, what is truly important with the car that should be matched with the AD system? The obvious thing when you meet somebody and you want a relationship is you look at the outside, the physical parts, and then you learn that the inside is the most important. But I will start with the inside now. So the most important for this vehicle is to be redundant. To have a backup system if something fails in steering, braking, torque, motion control, all this. It's also very important, and this is not an acronym, it's actually spelled out, to have a vehicle that is truly fail operational. And what do I mean by that? Well, fail safe is something that everyone understands. If it fails, you should be safe, you should not die. But to be fail operational means you will not only have a safe stop with the autonomous vehicle, but you will actually be able to run for some extra meters and seconds or even minutes to bring your passengers to a safe stop where they can safely move into another vehicle. And this is not easy. And to my knowledge, it's only one company that has managed to have a fully fail operational vehicle, and it's the Zeekr Waymo combo. We're very, very proud of that. Another thing is the energy efficiency, and this is where I get more into money, because everything about an autonomous vehicle is total cost of ownership. So the automotive industry, from back in the days and still today, has earned their money from service and repair. They could sell you a vehicle at a decent discount, and then they know that they will earn a lot of money throughout the years. But when you have a commercial fleet of autonomous vehicles, you also have a warranty system and a promise to the market that this vehicle should run with an uptime of preferably 22 hours per day. So you have some downtime for charging and cleaning and all this, but you want this vehicle to to go, go, go. And the battery could not be too heavy, too large, because that will affect the performance and the uptime. So to have a cooling system that efficiently cools the AD system and also provides a decent, good temperature to the vehicle, but most importantly, prolongs the range of that vehicle is extremely important. And this is also something that was done with this vehicle. And then one of my passion topics is the accessibility of this vehicle to everyone. So when we designed the Zeekr vehicle, we were very eager to have it with a very low step-in height. So it's only 30 centimeters high. And back to Cindy, wherever you are, that should match the average curbside. In order to make it easy to get in and out of the vehicle, also for those who cannot easily lift their legs or even access the car with a wheelchair. More on the physical side, what you see here is a vehicle that is NCAP 5-star rated. It's the safest car available. Usually what you need to have in a car to get the 5 stars is a B-pillar. So there should be something in the middle here to stabilize the cars if they were to fall over or turn around. And you don't see the B-pillar here, but it's actually integrated in the swiping doors. So when the doors close, the B-pillar locks, and it's super safe. And why is it important to have swiping doors? Well, if you were to ask Transdev, who is an operator that assists Waymo today on operations, they would tell you that most of the work that they have when they need to go out to the cars, the cars that run today, the Jaguars, is to close doors, because people sometimes forget to close the door properly, and then the car is instructed not to drive. So to have smart doors that open and close has been very important and also super difficult to develop. And then you see it's a flat floor. And what you don't see, but I can tell you, is that this vehicle platform is also multi-purpose. So you could easily bring a truck of goods, or what's it called? This
Parcel?
Pallet, exactly. Yeah. Thank you. So the size fits perfectly with the pallet if you want to unload and offload. And also much smarter to do it from this side than from behind. But we didn't need to change everything to make a purpose-built vehicle work. One thing that we did not change, that we did get a lot of questions on, was why do you still expect people to go to the trunk and put their luggage in the back? And the simple answer for that is it's safer. This car should run in 130 kilometers per hour. Maybe you can translate it to miles per hour. Fast.
Yeah.
And the service needs to be fast and smooth. And we're programmed today to go to the back of the car and put our luggage there. So it wouldn't be more efficient to try to instruct people to put it somewhere around the chairs or so on. So this was something that was decided not to change in this vehicle. Another smartness, something that is a little bit unique, I would say, or a difference between Europe and the US, is that in Europe, you must wear a safety belt. In the US, it's more optional in a way. So when you don't have a driver, how can you make sure that people, like I have teenagers, they sometimes would prefer to have the safety belt behind their back because it's cooler to be free or dance in the car. So this car was equipped with sensors in the seat. So it could feel whether it's a big man or a little child sitting there, and it will communicate with airbags that will drop down. And this vehicle has the largest airbag in the world to fill up the front space. And then there are airbags in the doors and also on the roof that will hug you. It's the avalanche safety system. Yeah, I could go on forever with details like this, but I will move quickly down to the attractive price point, because today, most people talk about the retrofits that are done of AD systems on vehicles. You see Toyotas, Mitsubishis, and Jaguars and other brands. And this is where the industry is right now. You do retrofits on existing cars. And me representing a purpose-built vehicle, I would say that what you do is actually complicating the scaling of this industry, because it will not be efficient to do retrofit of your AD system on an existing off-the-shelf car forever. There will be a time when you would need to see larger volumes to scale, and then you would need a vehicle that is actually built to dance perfectly with your AD system. It's also a bit complicated, and we've seen some incidents back in the days. There was actually a Volvo Uber incident a couple of years ago that could be blamed on the fact that the off-the-shelf car today is often a level 2, or even today a level 2 plus car on safety level. And what is needed to be super safe and integrated with a very smart L4 AD system is really an L0 car. So the car would be better, super robust, stable, with a good TCO delivery, but with no brain whatsoever. So today, when you integrate and retrofit, you would need to disconnect the little brain that the cars of today have in order to activate the smart brain of the robo system. So this is something that we would really, from the vehicle industry, really like to see quite soon, that we have these purpose-built vehicles available. And volume. In order to see this business grow for all the AD tech companies, we would also need to see volume brought to the vehicles. The volumes that are deployed right now with maybe 50 to 500 or even 1,000 vehicles per city, it's still a very small volume. And if you develop a new car, you could hand build easily 5 cars. You could go to what we call a pilot plant and maybe build 100 cars. They would be quite expensive. But to provide 1,000 cars, it's more or less an impossible number if you were to build a new car. You would need to add maybe 100,000 cars to have a good price point. And the price point is super expensive, super important in order to scale the industry with good economics. So I would vote for some crowdfunding that AD Systems agree to share the same vehicle to bring volume to it. And back to the having sex in the car. Several new revenue streams, and I'm not joking, from several countries in Asia. One of the use cases have been dating pods, or movie pods, or karaoke pods, or some vehicles where young people could actually meet outside their parents' house. So it's a real case. And for sure, when it comes to safety, we also in the vehicle industry need to provide some sort of in-cabin monitoring. So you could just imagine the GDPR topics there. But something that is really interesting for the automotive industry is to learn how to add new revenue streams to your vehicle. You could use this vehicle for so many things when you're not, when you don't need to have hands and eyes on the road. It could be your office, it could be your doctor with health checks. It could be your teacher to your kids, taking them to sports practice and so on. For the city, we would also really like to have a vital discussion around the safety guard. Like this vehicle could roam around the city to see where there are burglaries happening and even worse. For sure, the vehicle could also monitor potholes and other problems on the roads and report. And we need to decide who should earn money from this. Should it be the AD system providers or a split business with the automotive industry, or who should own this? It's not clear, and it's a discussion between the different stakeholders at all times. What I wanted to say to Scott from LA is that it's also possible to use these vehicles. It's a patented technology, but these vehicles could be used as external air cleaners. So there's been some research done that proves that 1,000 of those vehicles in a city would be equivalent to the CO2 towers that sort of collects particles and clean the air. So this is something that we would love for cities to include in their tenders, this technology, to use the cars for that reason. Very, very quickly now, safety for AVs. It is a big topic, this in-cabin monitoring. It's also a big topic to have cameras or monitoring around the ingress and egress to these vehicles, since there is no driver. And this is a technology that we have been working on and developing for a long, long time in the industry. But the passengers to these vehicles need to agree that their safety is more important than their integrity. And this is a discussion I would like to have later on. A photo from the LA premiere. Very flat chairs, easy to get in, easy to get out. Not your usual car share. This vehicle is also made to be able to separate the seats. So you could, in the future, share the vehicle with people you don't know. You could book seat 1A or 2B. Research that we've done has proven that you would not like to be totally blocked out so that you don't see at all who's in the next seat next to you. So you would like some transparency, but not too much. And then there is always questions around why is everyone facing forward in this vehicle while Zoox choose to have people facing each other. And yeah, everyone is different, but we believe when you go fast, you want to see the road, and there are people that get motion sick and so on. So this, to us, was also the better choice of providing safety with airbags and sort of not get people motion sick in the car. There is technologies for easy communication between passengers in back seat and front seat. You could create sound bubbles in the car, so you could be speaking from seat 2C with 1A without screaming and disturbing somebody else. So yeah, most of this you know already. So what is needed still? The automotive industry needs to be even better at providing an autonomous vehicle that includes also disabled with wheelchair necessities. The vehicle that I was part of designing has a possibility, not saying that it will be in the first version now in SF, but it has a possibility to turn the seat out into the curbside, so it's easier to move in, and then it will bring you back into the car. So that is one way of making it easier. But a lot more needs to be done, and it's quite difficult engineering to have a ramp and to have somebody sort of fast in a wheelchair in a safe way in the car. So the solution for now is to say that these cars would cater for most of the trips, but there will still be a need in the city for some vehicles with a physical human driver to assist those in wheelchairs. So this is where we are right now. A good thing also would be if these vehicles could be easily integrated with more AD systems, since different AD providers expand with different ODDs, operational design domains. So in order to grow the industry faster, let's use the vehicle as a commodity, but have it with an API that could easily integrate with more AD systems. That would be a dream. And then something we will discuss, you and I, a little bit more, I think, after this, is the need that I've seen for a new type of OEM in this industry that would source both vehicle and AD system and integrate and be responsible for the region where the vehicles are to be deployed and operated. Why do I say that? Well, because the typical AD tech provider really wants to sell their tech to the big automotive OEM. And not all of them love to do operations, but they love to develop their tech. The automotive company is super good at sourcing steering wheels and braking systems, but they are not good at sourcing a driver. So they would prefer to sell the car to the AD tech company. And this is where the industry has been for a couple of years now, discussing who would sell to who. And also with investors, especially from the automotive side, that love to sell a lot of cars. And in this business, the whole thing is you should sell less cars, but the revenue will come to you as a company after, while you can provide service and components to these vehicles. So it's more like the truck industry. So these are really the two big questions that I would like to see solved over time, and also to bring in leaders and investors to this AV OEM that are passionate about this business, that understand the business case, that can wait for an ROI down the line, and so on. So I think I will leave you. I spoke all too long.
Well, no,
Yeah.
I think you've said everything. So I'll be honest. I had a chance to test drive the vehicle with Charlotte in November. So everything she said is an understatement. I will say that it's a beautiful vehicle, and all of the features. If you've at some point when we're able to go in the vehicle in San Francisco, you will not even imagine what the vehicle can do, because Geely the Zeekr vehicles are amazing. And I think we should just be honest with ourselves. China is producing amazing cars. I mean, the BYD cars are incredible too. And so Geely as an automotive group is just producing amazing cars. And this is the Zeekr cars are just well-designed vehicles. And this is your team did well. And I think what you're moving on to doing some great stuff in your future roles too. So maybe we should just start. I think we don't have a ton of time, so I want to hit on three things.
Yeah.
And I think what I'd like to touch on first is just this idea of, we really haven't spent a lot of time in this industry talking about the car, and yet we in the Bay Area and we have been fixated with this idea of the software-defined vehicle and the software side. But what are you thinking in terms of this future of kind of this organization that is the AV OEM? And so you have this idea of like this fusional entity. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think it will be an absolute necessity to have this setup where we actually see the vehicle once designed, and it could look differently. It could be a bigger shuttle, it could be a bus, whatever. So the platform is one thing, the size is something else. But once designed, it should be seen as a commodity. And the most important thing for the industry is to scale and to have a lot of volume brought to these types of vehicles. I'm not saying, like Hyundai do great vehicles, Toyota as well. So like there are more players in this industry. But to settle with having not too many different vehicles, because all of that is energy consuming and will sort of burden the climate. Yeah. But as I said before, to use these vehicles with an agnostic interface to help grow the AD technology, because the AD technology should continue to go up wider and further, and not down what they've done for many years now, try to understand how to integrate with the vehicle. So a lot of engineers have spent a lot of time trying to sort of hack systems or integrate. And what I'm really proud to say about this vehicle and this team, and that I hope to see in a coming AV entity setup, is to use what we have here. I could do a comparison to Formula One. This to me is the Red Bull car, and the team of engineers. They are the Red Bull team. It's
Yeah.
the best team, the best car. And Waymo, if you ask me, is Max Verstappen. So, but the team and the car could help also the Formula 2 and 3 drivers to develop faster. And I would really like to see that happen.
Right.
Yeah. And
So yeah, when you first told me this, I thought it was one of the my immediate response was that Cruise was almost that company, and so it was, we worked a lot with Cruise early on in terms of testing their rider, doing some rider testing and their components, and so it was really hard for me to see Cruise kind of go through some challenges. So I'm really excited to also hear what Volkswagen is going to tell us later, and we're really excited to see them succeed as well.
I just want to have one comment on what Scott said about charging.
Yeah.
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Before I'm cannot.
Armia is not going to decapitate us. She may decapitate me, but
Okay, not me.
But no, she's going to give us 3 more minutes because we're going to get to shared mobility.
Yeah.
And you can chastise me later.
So I just wanted to comment on one thing. Since my previous career, before I've been on two projects, also the Swedish NEVS project on autonomous vehicles. But before that, I was all about EV charging, battery storage, all this. In the US now, you're finally allowed to take out the onboard charger, so you could go DC charging with these ones. And everyone knows that the electric vehicle industry needs to help itself to charge because there is a lack of energy in the system globally. So if you ask me, I say 0 curbside charging. Charging should be in properties, and the properties should have PV, solar, battery storage, so it should be like DC, sun to roof, DC, to battery storage, DC, to car, DC. This is my vision. And in Europe, there is a lot of efforts being made now to convince people who buy their private EVs to go bi-directional charging, to park their cars in certain places, like please come to this hospital, park your car so we can use your battery so we don't need to close down operations. But people don't do that because then they start to think about warranties for the battery and maybe I would need to drive very far soon, so they don't trust. It's excellent to use these vehicles because they will go. I see them more as a stock on the stock market. They will be sold to those who pay the best. So if the best pay is to do last mile delivery of goods or transport people or do some hospital services driving people there, or just stand as milk cows to support a building with mobile energy storage, the robo will agree.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to go a totally different direction,
Okay.
which is really important for us, because you have some awesome ideas about this. And I know you're really passionate about it because you live in Stockholm, and you're all about, you like shared.
Yes.
How do we get to people sharing this vehicle? You have some ideas, but also you have some ideas about how cities could engage with this shared fleet.
And we talk about it a little bit differently. I think we forget, when we talk about shared mobility, we forget that just the simple fact that even if you're riding alone in this car, it won't stand still when you're not in it. So it will be repeatedly a lot of alone people in the car during the day. So that is shared mobility to start with. I just wanted to make that point. But how do we get people to share with strangers in the same car? Money. So money and time. So if you start by providing these vehicles and, for sure, I could book it for myself. I feel safe. I feel I can afford it. Maybe the next time it's 3 a.m. in the morning at the airport and it's not easy to find a cab. And then I will look around, and for sure I would share my ride. And this is how it all starts. And then hopefully we will actually see that it will benefit the wallet and our social life, and you will feel good about sharing your rides. So it will happen. We just need to start providing it. I know now you will say that Uber tried it and everyone has tried it.
No, I think, but also I know, because I've sat in the prototype. you're testing out some dividers
Yeah.
that can be part of the physical design. So
Yeah.
the hardware on these vehicles is unique because the vehicle can be modified to actually have partitions.
And you also have the scent neutral.
Oh my gosh, you can put scent in the vehicles. I mean,
Yeah,
you can
no
put
sweat, no
We can
cigarettes.
put sound bubbles.
Yes.
We can do. And actually, this is my worst pet peeve about the Waymo I-Paces. I got in yesterday, and there was a
Yeah.
cigarette smell, and I complained.
Yeah.
So
It's an Israeli invention, the white scent.
okay. On that note, I do think we're out of time.
Yes,
Because
sorry.
and that was it's a bad note to end on, but it's a.
I will hang around. I would love to.
So
talk
Charlotte
to
will
you.
be around, but we're going to start using common language now, and I'm going to remind people, and those of you online, you have to stick around because we're only halfway through. We have about an hour and a half left of content. Stick with us. We actually, those of you here, you're going to go out and engage for the next 25 minutes in our media booth. You too, you're going to tell us your story. And we are going to have some fun out in our lounge. We still have coffee out there. Come back. We have another panel, and we're going to hear from Katrin Lohman. And then we'll close up and hear from Michael. Thank you for being here, and we'll be back in 25 minutes.
Hello, if I do like Christine. My name is Henriette Cornet. I am a professor at USF and co-director with Billy of the AV and the City initiative. Super happy to be here, super happy to see so many people in the room. And I'm also a CEO of a company called Urban Innovate. You may have seen it on the slide before. It's important. We have really strong collaboration between my company and the AV and the City. And the focus for me is really much on urban transportation. So go also beyond AVs. And that will be the topic, very much a topic of what's coming next of our panel, to go beyond AV and see how they are embedded in also something bigger, the topic of sustainability, the topic of public transit, really seeing the city as a holistic, good, holistic system that needs to be livable really for all. So please welcome with me on stage 3 amazing speakers. And go on stage and you will have the occasion to say your name when, you are already there. Thank you very much. Take a seat. Great. So from this side, so we have on your right side, we have Adam Lenz from Waymo, who is head of sustainability. All of the speakers will present themselves into detail, but just quickly. Patrick Gitster, who is from the San Mateo Country Authority. For you, I wrote down actually what you're doing. Director for Planning and Fund Management. So please, you will tell us in a moment what it is. And we have Cameron Gueda, who is independent expert, ex-Pony AI, will share his insight with us. So all welcome on stage. Thank you that you made it. I have plenty of questions for you. We have a bit of time in front of us. I'm really looking forward to it. But to start really with presentations, we'll start with Adam, and you will share what you're doing at Waymo. Waymo and sustainability, I kind of love the combination. As you know, like for me, I did some post about it recently, that the topic of technology, sustainability, and partnerships is just my favorite topics overall. So we will talk about all that, and I'm looking forward to listen to all of you. So let's start maybe with your presentation, Adam, and we'll move on afterwards.
Sounds great. Thanks. Hey, everyone. Again, my name's Adam Lenz. I lead our sustainability work at Waymo. Really excited to tell you about our sustainability vision. I have a brief slide deck, and I'll start us off just by telling you about where we are as a company. I love hearing all the discussion about Waymo so far, and I'm just really passionate about this space as well. So just to kick things off, we're serving riders now in 4 cities, over 250,000 rides per week. So really excited about that. We recently launched in Austin through a partnership with Uber. So, and then we are now in plans to expand to Atlanta, Miami, and DC. So really excited about the cities in front of us. And we'll continue to do that with partnerships and with Waymo-led markets as well. And we've also announced recently that we're doing an international road trip to Tokyo. So I think there's been some news coverage on that, but our cars are now arriving in Tokyo. So we'll be doing some testing there as well. So really exciting cities and opportunities in front of us to continue to collaborate with cities across the globe. So switching gears a little bit, just talking about our mission is to be the world's most trusted driver. And really what that means is honoring out our commitments to safety, sustainability, and accessibility. On the sustainability side, to be really specific and simple about it, our sustainability goal is to increase access to shared electric vehicles and support more walkable, bikeable, and transit-rich communities. So we really want to keep it simple and just trying to focus on those areas with sustainability. And I'm excited to dive into each one of those categories a little bit more. On the EV side, I'd love to see just a show of hands, how many folks own electric vehicles here? Okay, some good hands. So we know that EVs have, a lot of benefits. It's just a nicer ride. It's quiet. It's obviously cleaner. And it's a great experience. There's some cost benefits and that sort of thing. And occasionally you get to ride in the carpool lane. So there's some benefits there, but we know that access remains a challenge for a lot of folks. And I think that's where our shared EV service can come to play. And when we look at the service that we provide, it's the full vehicle cycle of a shared electric vehicle service. So we're building out the EV charging infrastructure. We are procuring renewable energy. We're actually purchasing the vehicles, putting our tech on top, and making it really super easy and convenient for folks to access an electric vehicle when they need it. So it's really about bringing an EV to the curb, not to your driveway for us. And we think that this is an easier way to connect people with an EV when they need it. But that's just not our sustainability story and goal. It really extends beyond that. And we think that safer roads are sustainable. We think that we can prove out some benefits for bicyclists, for pedestrians, through our features, through our technology, and then also through just the ability for the technology to see 3 football fields away, day, night, rain, shine, and have this incredible visibility of everyone on the road. It's never tired, it's never distracted. So obviously, there's some benefits here. For me, this one's really to speak to my transportation story about the day of today. My commute is really to take my kid to preschool every morning. And most times I bike or I take the stroller and I run 4 miles. And I have a lot of experiences with vehicles on a daily basis. And this is what inspires me in my story to just prove out sustainability benefits of autonomous vehicle technology. So zooming out a little bit, talking about shared mobility, we see shared mobility as a team sport. It's a team effort to work with the active transportation community, with cities and transportation. We want to grow this pie. We don't want to divide it up. So we want to partner with cities, collaborate, figure out how to work within the transportation ecosystem, not alongside it. And we think that shared mobility is a great strategy for us to work in that space. And really excited to have a conversation about that. So that's our sustainability vision, and excited to talk more about that.
Thank you. Thank you, Adam. Okay, let's move on directly to the round of presentation with Patrick. Please, Patrick, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Thanks for having us today. I'm Patrick Gilster, the Director of Planning and Fund Management with the San Mateo County Transportation Authority. Most of you probably have never heard of us and probably won't in the future too, and that means we're doing our job. But we're here because we manage the sales taxes for transportation in San Mateo County. So we have 2 half-cent sales taxes that go directly to funding transportation projects, and they're each about $1 billion of funding over 25 and 30 years. So we have a big responsibility to make sure we're investing that money appropriately. And I want to give a shout out to our partners at CCAG, the City and County Association of Governments of San Mateo County. I know we have lots of big acronyms. Audrey Shermez is here, who's one of our partners on our automated vehicle strategic plan. We basically set out a few years ago, and this is where kind of Billy came into this with us and did a workshop with Samtrans, which is the bus service in San Mateo County, and the Transportation Authority to figure out what is going on with AVs, how does it apply to our county, what are folks interested in at the local level, and how do we kind of figure out where to move from there. And that all evolved into an AV strategic plan and a partnership between the funding side and our county transportation agency, which is CCAG, the federally designated funding agency. So with that, we created the AV strategic plan. We had a few different goals. I think we're one of the first countywide AV strategic plan, and really figuring out what our own why is and what do we want to see as a county. We hear so often about private companies really having an idea of what they want to do, or that there's ideas that they can serve us. To be honest, many counties and cities have not had the opportunity to think about it. We are staff limited. Our agencies alone are only 10 to 15 people, and that's of countywide purview. Our transportation folks at cities are often 3 people, other than maybe some of the capital improvement people who are implementing a lot of the projects that we get funded. So there was a big question of how do we, as the countywide agencies, help identify what our opportunities are. And so we really wanted to figure out how do we develop a cohesive strategies to help our cities and our policymakers think about these choices that are coming. And in the middle of developing all this, Waymo expanded into San Mateo County. So we thought it was happening at the right time, and the discussion was happening in the right way, so that we had an idea of what we wanted to talk about when this came up, and help us prepare for AV future development. So the big question I think that our county board of supervisors had was, is it just Waymo that's coming? And the answer to us on our side was, no, these are, when we're talking about automated vehicles and technologies, we're talking about anything from the ride-hailing services to how does this integrate with our transit services? And that's, I think, where we come in today, what we'll show. And the freight that was mentioned earlier, and also personal vehicles. Are those going away? What do those look like as well? So one of the biggest things we did, we held a big second workshop with CCAG and us, and really asked our public about what things they were interested in. And I really appreciated the comments about this isn't just an urban experience, and there are other potential applications. We've heard from people on our coast side. So if you think of San Mateo County, we have the big developed side where we have Caltrain and the US 101 and El Camino Real, but we also have communities on our coast side, such as Half Moon Bay and Pacifica, where they aren't as dense and they are more spread out, but there's still a huge need of how we serve folks on that end too. So people were interested in applications there about how you're, if we can't serve you with a bus full time, how do we potentially think of where AVs fit into that scenario and can bridge this gap of where transit might not be able to serve you? So at the end of all of this, there's a full plan we developed, but we came up with a few different short-term actions. We needed to figure out who's going to staff and lead this, have a committee of our different transportation folks at the county level that are interested in this, and create a working group that actually can react to things and provide comments on that. And then ensure that our funding actually is set up to fund these things. So we started this because one of our measures, Measure A, has an intelligent transportation systems category, and we actually expanded that definition to be beyond the typical ITS kind of transportation, transit signal kind of things, to actually be more about data and operations and AVs and thinking about shared mobility as part of that together. And then the last one, kind of where we landed as how can we as the two county entities help our jurisdictions, and kind of more questions than answers, but trying to figure out, assess the feasibility of AV shuttle pilots in equity priority communities. So a big thing we heard was we don't want our equity priority communities and our disadvantaged communities, our underserved populations, to get left behind when all of this happens. And while there's great that we hear this from private companies also thinking the same thing, we think it's also our responsibility to make sure we are also engaging with them and making sure we're proactive about that, and that it's not a reactive thing. So we're going to be kicking off an endeavor as continuing the partnership with us and CCAG to actually start kind of a feasibility analysis of where are these the right areas to have either fixed route or other on-demand services for shared mobility when it comes to shared shuttles, then try to figure out where we go from there across an entire county. So it's easy when you have defined boundaries of a city, but when we're talking about 21 jurisdictions and how we go across there, it's a big task, but we need to start somewhere. So our contact information is up there, but we have fully adopted the plan, I think in October of last year, and then we'll be looking to actually implement the next phase come this fall, I believe. So.
Thank you.
Oh, and I can give my why of some of this. I grew up in Southern California in Orange County, and for those that know from a millennial about the OC, you kind of 6-lane arterials everywhere. You can't really get anything built into hills. You relied on a car for everything. And I really appreciated the comment earlier about, is this a land use problem? And I fully believe it is. In transportation, we have enabled land use to develop at these patterns, whether it's these mega streets or mega freeways to continue to sprawl out. And I left and obviously came. Well, USF was my second choice, I will say, when I went to college. My first was University of Washington in Seattle, but I obviously have ended up back down here. So,
Thanks.
oh, and I will say, you can work with your professors at some point. Sorry, Billy and Anurag, this is 10 years out of grad school from studying under them. So.
Nice. Wow. Nice introduction. And thanks for bringing back to the why. I think that's a good point, Cameron. You can go on that as well. But please introduce yourself. Yeah.
So my name's Cameron Gita. I left Pony AI just at the end of March here. Chinese, probably the second largest AV company in the world, largest autonomous trucking company that very few people know about. And I've spent most of my career bringing novel technologies into existing vertical markets like semiconductor and fiber optic sensing, brought a lot of robots into factories during my time with a big company called Zik in Germany. And then more recently, bringing cars to the people that wanted to drive them autonomously. We started a company called Autonomous Stuff. That was, I think Waymo talked about this a little bit. We were hacking the vehicles, or Charlotte did really, hacking vehicles, providing them to researchers with computers and LiDAR and cameras and everything else, and sending them on their way. And that was kind of the beginning of the AV gold rush, maybe 2014, 2015. Which I think has peaked, and we're now down in this different part of the hype cycle for that technology. And the next journey for me is probably more in safety and industrial automation, but still have a deep passion for this industry. I'm also a board member on the Strategic Advisory Board for Contra Costa County's Work Development Force. So this is a funded project in collaboration with the Gomentum Station, where we're seeking to kind of create opportunities for high school students to get into mobility and understand where those entry points are, which is really exciting work for me. And it's a bit of giving back. And my why is my father moved up to the Bay Area from SoCal in the 70s to start BART. So BART was kind of an integral part of my family since the very beginning. And as a sign of the times, at age, 12, we had free lifetime BART passes. So this is late 80s, we were allowed to, as children, to come to the city by ourselves and run around Chinatown and buy stink bombs and ride skateboards and ride back, and that was a very safe thing to do. It's sad that isn't the case today, and my vision for the future is to enable that again. To have a society that we feel comfortable enough to put our kids in autonomous cars, on trains by themselves, and get to experience the stuff that I had when I was a kid. So happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank all of you already for the introduction. So I'm very happy of this panel, of the diversity of your background, having really the industry and authority, and Cameron as an expert, like looking at all that together. The question I have in the topic of sustainability, but also partnership, future of mobility, etc., who is shaping the narrative? So, and what I have in the question, so the context of this question also comes from my European background, as you all have heard, probably, that in Europe, cities sometimes have a stronger say in what can be on their road, where in the US, the impression I have since I moved here, it's very market-driven, when you look at the field, at least, of autonomous vehicles. So where are we? And when we think of this common good that we all want to have for livable cities and accessibility, etc., who is shaping the narrative and how do we deal with that? And who has to adapt to whom? If in any case. So who wants to start with this tough question? You want to?
That's a provocative one, but I mean, the narrative in the US is shaped by money. So venture capitalists who are now telling the story of how humanoid robots are going to save us all 5 years ago were telling us how autonomous cars were going to save the world because they had massive financial incentives to do so. And which is, I think the outcomes of those situations are never good, because the public good and the public will is never really considered when I'm making $1 billion bet on Luminar or Aurora or whatever. And I contrast that to the last 2 years I'd spent trying to deploy these systems in Europe. And you cannot go into a European city as an AV company without having direct connectivity with the public transportation agency that already exists, because it's so much more trusted and utilized by the citizens. It's an integral part of their society. And I think that's the disconnect we have here in the US, is that a lot of my wealthy friends would never consider getting on a BART train. They're like, "Are you rode BART here? Like, are you crazy?" You know, I just drove my Lucid, whatever. And so there's a choice there. And for me, it's who wants to, I don't care if I'm in a Bugatti, I don't want to sit in traffic. I'd much rather sit on the train and look down at the people in traffic, those idiots. So, but that connectivity between tech companies and public utilities, I think, needs some work here in the US, and I think Waymo's doing amazing work there to start that. But the Europeans had this very holistic view of like, we just want to give more options to make public transportation even more vital. How do you get people to the train station, from the train station, to make sure that those systems that we've invested in are more utilized? And that's the kind of vision I have for the US, is to disincentivize cars, make it so you have to go to the train, or you're incentivized to do that. And I think implementing those things slowly will change behaviors and make people more comfortable with these systems.
Okay, great. Who wants to go first? Because, I really want to hear both.
I'm happy to go next. From the county perspective, we took a look at that in our strategic plan and tried to understand who has the power to regulate, is the power of influence, at least when it comes to the public sector. And so for us, we put together a whole kind of roles assessment of where everyone is making these decision powers to figure out what do we have a say in and what can we influence. And from a lot of these regulations, they happen at the DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles, or the California Public Utilities Commission. And we actually don't have a lot of say when it comes to fleet regulations of robo-taxis, in particular when they come into San Mateo County. And so that was an interesting thing for us to look at. And we said, okay, kind of your question on sustainability, well, if we can't regulate that, what are the areas that we can influence? And that is things like you heard in the last panel about curb space management, things like that, that we could understand, okay, where should these vehicles be going? And maybe we don't have to tell them exactly, but if you make it more attractive and convenient for them to drop off, maybe they will actually use that more and people will understand that. And then it's into the kind of the shuttle side of one of our measures has a shuttle program and funding program in of itself. So we give millions of dollars a year from us and from CCAG to actually fund the Peninsula Shuttle program. So we have 26 different shuttles, and they are both first last mile commuter shuttles, they're community shuttles. There's free ones that go around like South San Francisco, for instance, that are funded by the Transportation Authority. So we are trying to figure out what is the next gen for those things, given driver shortages from the transit side, and given that they are just increasing in money, increasing in expense. So we're seeing a doubling of costs over the next kind of 2 to 6 year period. And we just don't have enough money to keep funding the number of shuttles at the levels we do. So what is our transition plan for the future? Is that which routes need drivers or which routes could be AV shuttles, things like that. So those are the types of things we're looking at in terms of how we influence.
Yeah, and I think for us, we're obviously a highly regulated industry working with the CPUC and Air Resources Board, et cetera. And I think no matter what, it really just comes down to building trust, with communities. And you can't really just, buy trust. You have to earn it, and it's, easily lost. So for us, it's really about being incremental, being methodical, doing things right. And really building those relationships with community stakeholders, whether that be the police and fire department, and us hosting trainings with first responders with our first responder ambassadors, whether that's about publishing safety publications, proving out our methodologies, or if you visit our website, you could see a dashboard that quantifies safety benefits from reduction in airbag deployments, injury-causing crashes, and police-reported crashes. So those sorts of things, and trying to bring transparency to it. If you go to our sustainability website, you'll see how we're working with local utilities to source renewable energy. Clean Power SF is one of those, a program under the SFPUC. So not just buying renewable energy from them, but also partnering on demand response programs during peak emergency days during the summer. So really trying to work on all facets of building trust with communities. We also have some information on there about our avoided emissions methodology, which I'm really proud of, and I think it's interesting to look at the AV space and how we quantify those benefits and work together with the state frameworks that are in place to either source low carbon fuels or how to reduce emissions from ride-hailing services. So I think those are really important things that it's all about building trust, working with state, local governments to do really good work and providing an excellent service. So.
Yeah, thank you. And with what I've been said in the previous panel, actually, and also some of the keywords that I've heard in your presentation. So sustainability there. So there is also aspect. There was a debate a bit before of the vehicle miles traveled, for example, if we should use that, or instead of people, the number of people traveling on the roads. You mentioned land use, and it was also mentioned very heavily in the previous panel. I noted as well, equity measures. So sustainability is very large. You mentioned also, Cameron, the workforce aspect. So it's really not only the environment, but it goes also beyond towards more like the society as a whole, economic wealth, etc., economic viability, etc. So I will start from Adam, and after Patrick and Cameron, you can comment also on that. What are your top sustainability goals, and how do you measure against these goals if really you have to put the priority on those, on everything that we've mentioned and you have heard also before in the conference?
Mm-hmm. So I'll go back to our sustainability goal of, again, connecting more people with shared EVs, supporting more walkable, bikeable, and transit-rich communities. So, goals that relate to that are really building an efficient shared EV service. So increasing access. I know I asked before how many people have actually taken a Waymo. And I just want to see a contrast. So that's great. About a fourth of people have raised their hands and said they own an EV. So we're increasing EV access. But they're just having an efficient service, I think, is really speaks to that. So the whole company is really dedicated to building an efficient service that connects more people with our ride-hail service. On the walkable, bikeable community side, of course, we want to prove out our safety benefits. So that's really how we're measuring that, and being open, responsive, transparent in those methodologies and that quantification in that reporting. And getting over to the transit side, really excited that we've been piloting transit rewards programs. So we piloted one in the Bay Area at the end of last year, getting people to use Waymo as a first last mile solution to some Muni, BART, and Caltrain stops that were in our service territory, so that we had some great learnings from that. So we're still working towards our strategy and implementing that for connecting people first last mile. We think it's a great option right now, and we also are doing some pilots in the LA area as well on that end. So really excited about gaining learnings from all those things and continuing to improve.
And if I may ask, Adam, before we move to Patrick, you presented, I saw on your slide, these new vehicles that we have been seeing around and that we saw also in Charlotte's presentation. Is there something that will add on, that will progress the topic of sustainability as well? Is there something you can share on these new vehicles being somewhere paving a new way towards enhanced sustainability, if I can say?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question because we have the Zeekr platform coming into our service, and that's because we share our vehicles and we actually utilize them a great deal, right? So these electric vehicles are used significantly more than a personal vehicle, and that's a great thing. We're sharing it, we're driving that utilization, and actually it's going to be retired sooner than a personal vehicle would. So our personal vehicles probably have a 10, 15-year lifespan, and they're parked 95% of the time, taking up a couple 300 square feet and a parking space, and maybe there's it depends on the city you're in on the parking to car ratio, but I think it's a really interesting topic. So that said, these vehicles are going to reach their end of life sooner, and we have an ability to get those materials back into the supply chain. Batteries are highly recyclable. There's 95% material capture for those EV batteries, so they can get put right back into the supply chain. So that's fantastic, and we know there's some second life applications out there as well. So I hope I answered your question, but there's there's something there where it's actually using the vehicle and through a shared mobility space is really efficient and has a huge sustainability benefit, in my opinion. And then just on the side of it's a shared vehicle, we're hoping to connect riders consecutively, and it's not pooled yet. And I appreciate the conversation on shared and pooled earlier, and it's a work in progress, and we're excited for that. So.
Yeah, super interesting. And I like that you mentioned, and it was also mentioned by Charlotte earlier, these extra use cases, because I tend to focus a lot on, personally, on my research, on everything I've did in my career so far on passengers movement. But I really like this idea of using these vehicles as a commodity to extend the type of use cases for logistic or for V2G, like vehicle-to-grid applications. I'm really looking forward to see that more of this work. So Patrick, back to the question, if you remember, about your top sustainability goals and how do you measure them, in your plan, in your strategic plan, what are they?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question because we have so many different funding programs, from the more traditional highway and bicycle and pedestrian, the infrastructure side, where those things we are looking at vehicle miles traveled reduction, greenhouse gas reduction. We do have a category in there. So let me take a step back. We update our evaluation criteria for each of our funding programs every 5 years. And as part of those, we have a whole different way for each program that we look at those. So on the infrastructure side, we do look at the impacts to those type of sustainability metrics and things like, are you including stormwater in a lot of your projects? The short answer is we could do better, as I think Cindy alluded to earlier. On the transit side, we just adopted last year in one of our newest measures that was approved in 2018, created a new funding program called Regional Transit Connections, and it's 10% of our Measure W. And it's about $10+ million a year that can go towards these regional connections to BART and Caltrain and the ferry service here. And as part of that, we tried to understand what metrics we should be looking at on that side, because most of our transit funding had been pass-through funding directly to Caltrain or directly to BART, but never have we been on this side of really saying, how are we going to evaluate this? And one of the kind of interesting things that we came up with is a lot about the user experience and getting people to be attracted to transit to increase ridership. And with that is a way of trying to look at kind of the VMT offset and trying to figure out, okay, if you did take this, how do we then backtrack and calculate what you would have done in terms of VMT, which Caltrans, for the people who work on infrastructure projects, has tools that we can do that for infrastructure, but it's less concrete when we start talking about these minor improvements to transit. And so looking there as a way to do it. But we're also taking a look at where the bus stops are located, where the shuttle stops are located, your service frequencies. We're trying to also shift to the zero emissions vehicle side when it comes to our shuttle program. But that involves getting the contracted shuttle services to also purchase those vehicles and have that be a part of a contract. So it is a long process that we're hoping to encourage that shift from the funding side.
I see.
Interesting.
Thank you. Cameron, you would like
I
to
could just
comment
riff on a couple of those, and I'll bring up a theory Charlotte talked about in how do you charge these things, because as Waymo, there's a handful of Waymos here now, and as their business expands, it has to. There will be an energy crunch here at a certain point that will beg some sort of infrastructure improvement. And I think we talked a lot about parking. We're going to have a lot of empty parking garages here. And I think even this one down on 5th Street is already, it's a huge parking garage near Moscone Center that's mainly empty. Fill them with batteries. Put solar on top of them. That becomes the DC to DC infrastructure, which is very easily utilized, and a lot of those are city-owned garages. So kind of low-hanging fruit on the how do you charge this stuff? Because anytime we, as Pony, would go into a new city, and for us, the economics of a system didn't really make any sense until we had deployed about 100 vehicles. They're like, Luxembourg was the first place. They're like, well, are we going to park and charge 100 vehicles? My boss's quick retort was, AVs don't park. They should be, you want to utilize this asset as much as you possibly can. They should charge within their route, but you shouldn't really need a big parking depot, which was an interesting aspect. And I think lastly is the size. And we've talked a lot about the share of the city that we give over to transportation, which is outsized, right, because of the size of the vehicles. And I would beg to argue that even the Zeekr and even the Jag, which is a very sexy experience, I love it, and I think that's an amazing incentive, especially the connectivity to public trans. It's really a Zen-like experience. They should be smaller. And in China, Pony's business is run exclusively with quite compact cars, way less than Waymo. They're doing about 2,500 rides a day. 99% of them are single occupant, which tells us you could do this with a two-seater that could be maybe even shuttle-like. Companies like Glideways and Dromos that are developing these very much space-age bidirectional shuttles that are about 1 meter wide. I think these new modalities are the really only way we can evolve from this basically sacrificing massive amounts of the city to roads, is to literally have different types and sizes of vehicles to do this. Mm-hmm. So hopefully.
Yeah. So Cameron, what you're saying is do you see a form factor that will win it all, so to say, that there will be kind of a one style of vehicles that will...
I would never say that, because you're right. I mean, there isn't, but something that can accommodate 2 people in a little bit of stuff, or 1 person in a wheelchair, that is no wider than 1 meter or 3 or 4 feet.
Interesting.
Is something like bike lane size. So I think, and you've seen this in the U.S., these Escalade, I mean, trucks just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. That cycle has to absolutely end. It's ridiculous how big these cars are with 1 little person inside. It's hilarious.
Don't go to Orange County.
Yeah, no, I have a place in L.A. I know what it's like. But that's become that's consumptive, People want to show off, and that's how they do it. You used to do it in your S-Class. Now it's like well, hopefully it'll be a Rivian or something like that soon, but form factors need to change.
Mm-hmm. And so I received just a question right now, and it's matching with a bit still this view of the ideal city or county, whatever, like which area you are. So my work is always around places where there is transit to start with. So it's the fully rural area. It's another topic, I would say, where cars much more legitimacy there. But as soon as there is transit, train lines, buses, etc., what is kind of the ideal view of a city in the future, or in the, as I say, in a suburb or a place where people live and work and transfer? I can already a bit share my view so that you see where I would like to really tease your answer, so to say, is for the cases that you mentioned, Patrick, and it was mentioned throughout the day, and you just mentioned it with the wheelchair users and the equity community, etc. I actually don't believe that the community of people with very strong and very specific needs should rely on AVs. And I think in terms of maybe I would still want to have a human interacting with if I have special needs. It's not true for the entire community, and I don't think we should also stigmatize people with specific needs, because they have also, and we have heard that last year on this very stage, from Sharon, who was from the Lighthouse for the Blind, where she said she gained in autonomy using AV. So it's either or, but I can see part of the populations who should not interact with robots, maybe they will still need human contact, and I can see time of even my trips where I would enjoy the social contact. So there is this part, autonomous versus more like a traditional transit service, or the car, or the private car, or the Uber, or the TNC, the usual TNC services, and then the shape, like is it ride pooling? Are you sharing with strangers? Are you having what I would call more like a premium a service where you're on your own, etc.? Is it more like a bus? So how does it look like, and what would you, and I will start with you, obviously, Patrick, being in the county, being an authority, what would be kind of the ideal vision you would have on this mix of automation and human-driven, and which shape of vehicle would you like to see on your roads, so to say?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think it's something we try to grapple with a lot. So the Transportation Authority, we are actually under the San Mateo County Transit District, or Samtrans, the bus service. It's also the managing agency for Caltrain on the peninsula. So we have whole different viewpoints depending on what type of mode we're using. And I think one of the biggest things we've tried to think about over the last few years is we keep putting people into silos of you're a driver, you're a walker, you're this, and it's really, we've tried to change our narrative in general of we are people first planning and engagement and implementation, and really you don't need to be attached to any one mode, and I think that applies to AVs too. I think, and it's a failure of us in the transportation industry to say it is just one thing. I mean, it is how all these puzzles fit together. And for San Mateo County in particular, we don't see as much the AV when it comes to transit itself. There are elements of that we think could be driver assist, things like that. As we change the urban environment and we make lanes smaller, has anybody here driven a bus? It's very, very difficult. Keeping something in the lane like that and having driver assist features are great. But there's still a human need on the bus when it comes to safety and security in those aspects. So we're not looking at those changes, but we are looking at how do you connect to the regional transit services? How do you connect to our bus services? And for so long, our shuttles have done that. But even in San Mateo County, which is similar topography to San Francisco, very hilly, the land use side of that still leaves out a lot of people in terms of being able to be without a car. So there is still this kind of gap of we have rail, bus, shuttle. How then do we serve the rest of the population and even getting to some of those locations? And so I don't think it's one or the other, but it's really about how we integrate them as a system and how do you potentially shift to things like a mobility wallet that you can actually get between these things more sustainably and actually not have to think about that it's all being paid for different ways. And we all know even getting between transit services here is different.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, like collaboration will be difficult, right? I mean, putting these partnerships together with all these different players, it's where the complexity will come from for an authority, I suppose.
And even we get asked questions a lot, like, why do you need a shuttle there? Can't you just put a bike lane? And then we get to, well, not everyone can ride a bike. So there are still needs for some of these things that need to be balanced when we talk about the transportation system and making people have the options that they need so that the options that they can choose aren't always having to rely on driving themselves to work, whether that's transit, AVs, or others.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And Adam, so the way for you, I would like you to think about this question is really when you have this mission at Waymo for to push for sustainability, et cetera, et cetera. So how does that match with a very like a profit-oriented company? And how does it match in the entire like livability of city? What's your vision? What's your personal vision or dream, so to say, that you have in this area for fleets, for the fleets of the future?
It's really about having safe streets and access to clean transportation, helping people get to where they need to go and however they need to get there. I think entrusting people to make those decisions on their own, but making a wide array of options available is great. Like I love taking transit around, and sometimes you have to take ride hail home. And I love walking and biking, but you want to do so on safe streets. So I think that's what really inspires me is having healthy, vibrant, resilient communities, and I think having a safe and clean transportation system is what supports that. I also think that having an efficient transportation system is really, it helps build more housing. And I think that that's something that we as Californians and Bay Area people are really focused on. And how do we build more housing? How does transportation support more transit-oriented development and housing, and helping people just live healthy lives. So that's really what inspires me is productive and healthy, vibrant communities and cities.
Thank you. Sorry, Sergey, thank you very much for the questions. I'll take them here. Similarly, actually, as it happened before with Billy and his panel, we are reaching towards the end, and we have kind of a final round here. And so I will start with Cameron to make your final word. And the way I see also the interaction we had so far, I was quite fascinated by your career and all the places you've been and everything you've seen. So having worked for a Chinese company in the US, you have been so much into Europe. How does collaboration look like in the future? And maybe, okay, there is maybe an elephant in the room here of what's happening now, but what do you think we can still hope for the future international collaboration in the future?
Well, I think public-private partnerships in broad strokes, public-private partnerships. Companies like Waymo working with cities and counties, and other tech companies, Amazon, and there's incredible resources within these companies, especially here, right? And in my experience, not a lot, especially in the US, very little interaction between transit authorities and tech companies. And there should be some conduit, and I think even a funded conduit to make that happen so we can modernize our society. Europe's a little more integrated like that. Like a lot of Deutsche Bahn, V in Sweden, you can get from the bus to the train to the plane to a micro mobility all on one app. It's kind of normal. So I think that's kind of low-hanging fruit. But that begs these partnerships of very many different modalities, all with the Halcyon company being the public transit authority. So this does ask for larger government in a way, which I think in transportation, that's the only way we modernize our society. If we just keep pushing all the neighborhoods further away, you just incentivize that to happen more. So there has to be some paradigm shift of partnership to bring up the creativity to do this stuff, honestly, because there's, now 100 years of sort of entrenched thinking around freeways and the way we get around. It's going to be really hard to change that. So, and I think creating opportunities for these conversations, just like we're having now, are really awesome. And my last note is to use water, right? I would much rather be on a ferry than be on that bridge. And in San Francisco is like it's such a pain here because of that. There's two ways out, the Golden Gate and the Bay, and they're all horrible, and even getting horrible at this very moment, right? And imagine if you could, our office was down in Fremont, and there's like a slough there, and the water was right behind it. I could see San Francisco. And I'd joke with my buddy Andres, I'm like, why don't we just ride jet skis to work? So creativity, and I think that's where we start.
Nice, yeah, nice last word, thank you. Thank you very much. Adam, turning on you, so the topic of collaboration, back to collaboration, international collaboration, you are operating now you expand beyond US, so what are your expectations there also in your own goals of sustainability and et cetera? So it's a bit a tough one maybe to link with sustainability, but really this opening to collaborations.
Yeah, I think it's all about partnering locally and seeing what you can create. My background before Waymo is I worked in local government, a decade in-house and years as a consultant. And I think there's just so much possibility there, whether that be with community groups and understanding values and opportunities for partnership, or with city governments, understanding how different ways that we can plug into mobility programs, or with energy sourcing, energy goals. And I think there's a lot of uniqueness, there's a lot of similarities, and from a sustainability lens, all of our cities have climate action plans. All of them have, goals to increase access to electric vehicles, create safer roads, create transit-rich communities. So that's really why we were intentional about those pillars as part of our sustainability strategy and our goal. And we intend to bring those to every community that we operate in. So it's just, partnering locally to achieve those.
Mm-hmm. Nice, thank you. Thank you very much. Patrick, last words on this big topic.
The big topic of collaborations and partnerships. Yeah, I think the one interesting thing that most counties at a bigger level need help with is trying to figure out what is coming first when we're trying to make denser communities. And we are having this kind of pivotal moment of, we want to build affordable housing, we want more people to move here, but then we get lots of pushback. Well, how do we accommodate people on these roads? Do they have the right services? When can we get those? So what are some of these strategies that maybe could alleviate some of that when we remove parking minimums, things like that, that could facilitate or assuage those fears into more near term until we can invest in larger transformational projects? For instance, our El Camino Real project that we're working on with Samtrans in all of our cities in San Mateo County, the Grand Boulevard, for those familiar with it, is trying to figure out that very question. Does the housing need to come first to support something like bus rapid transit, or does the bus rapid transit need to come first so people have mobility options when they get there? And so that's been a really difficult conversation to figure out and how we move that forward.
Thank you. So thank you very much for the three of you. I think I'm very, very much looking forward to the future to see the expansion of Waymo and new vehicles coming, new cities, etc. What it will bring. On your side, really, like all these plans that you have, and it's getting more and more concrete. So very excited. And Cameron, we will look forward to see where we will find you next, so to say. And I'm sure you're going to contribute further to this type of discussion. So big applause for our speakers. Thank you very much. We have the last stage is a fireside chat. I learned this word here in the US. It's not something I used before. With Catherine Lohmann from Volkswagen ADMT. And since we were talking about acronyms, I look at what it means. It is autonomous driving, mobility, and transport. So Catherine, welcome on stage with me. Please, applause for Catherine. Thank you for being here. For me, it's very exciting to have Catherine here, and the reason why I invited her is, I lived 10 years in Germany, and despite my love for public transit, because I wrote my PhD thesis on the topic of public transit, when I was done, since I was living in Munich, I was like, and Bavaria is so strong with automotive industry, but in general, Germany, I say I need to have a peek of what the industry is doing. I cannot just stay in the public transit forever, public transportation. I need to work for the automotive industry and see what they are doing. And of course, seeing these huge machines that are these companies, right? This in German, like concern, like really like big companies, that's fascinating. And the volume, that I'm sure we will talk about that, the topic of scaling of volume. So when I saw that Volkswagen was going in the direction of autonomous driving, I got super excited, and I was very happy that you accept this invitation. And I would like to hear more from you and from what you're doing here. And so, tell us about the company, yourself, of course, first. Since when are you here? What are you doing? What is Volkswagen ADMT? And what is a product/service? So tell us more.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me here today. As you introduced me, my name is Catherine Lohmann. I'm a mechanical engineer, and I'm working here for Volkswagen's autonomous driving business unit. And we are not only making cool cars. No, we are also working on autonomous driving. And I'm really thrilled to be among such many great speakers here today to introduce what we are doing here at Volkswagen. I'm based actually here in the San Francisco Bay Area. So our office is in Belmont, so not far from here. And I'm responsible to introduce the ID. Buzz AD here in the US. And you can see a picture in the background here already. So we are using the iconic all-electric ID. Buzz, which was recently introduced here in the US end of last year. So some of you might have seen the vehicle already around here in San Francisco and the Bay Area. And we're using the vehicle and integrating self-driving technology. And we want to bring those vehicles and mobility and transportation services. So the acronym ADMT means Autonomous Driving for Mobility and Transport. And that's what the target is here, and I'm responsible for the US market.
Mm-hmm. I see. So tell us more about these beautiful vehicles, iconic, as you said. I can kind of agree.
Yeah.
What's so special? What makes it unique?
Sure. Maybe first of all, I would like to talk a little bit about the tech setup here, and let's see how close we can get to Charlotte's dreams, integrating self-driving technology as a car manufacturer. So actually, we're taking the vehicle, the ID. Buzz, which is a private car in the beginning, and we are integrating the technology of our partner Mobileye, which is an Israeli company. And we are really fully integrating the technology in the vehicle, as you can see it here also on the picture. It's really integrated in the vehicle. It contains cameras, LiDAR, radar, so the full set. And then we are developing that vehicle in close partnership with Volkswagen, most of the development teams in Germany. And we are developing it with an idea in mind, of course, to bring it to mobility and transport services. And one thing that is very important is that it's not only about the hardware of the vehicle, so not only the vehicle itself, but we are also developing a software platform, so a turnkey solution that is coming with the vehicle to make sure the vehicle is always safe to operate on a daily basis. You can think of it in the morning, it gets its stamp, you're safe to go. So that's something that is important to us, that the ego vehicle is really being able to operate autonomously. But secondly, also to integrate those ego vehicles then in larger fleets, which are then bringing the mobility or transportation service. And also that turnkey solution and the software platform is part of our future product offer. So this is what Volkswagen is focusing here on the product side. Mm-hmm. Maybe a second point, what is also unique to our approach is that we're building the vehicle with a global target here in mind. As I introduced already, most of the development teams are sitting in Germany, but we are focusing to bring that vehicle to the US as well. So we're thinking about it from the regulatory perspective, of course, very different in Europe and in the US. And also our tech teams are therefore international. Part of the team is here in the US. So with me here, part of the team in the Bay Area. But we are also running those fleets internationally. Part of my team is also in Austin, Texas. I think we might talk about it a little bit more as well, where we are operating the ID. Buzz on a daily basis. And we are also operating the vehicle in Germany, in Hamburg and Munich particularly, where we are testing the technology to bring it really international here to those services. Mm-hmm. So I think those are the main unique approaches we are taking into account here.
I see. Yeah, but since you mentioned Austin, let's dig into that. So what's happening there?
Yeah.
Which type of testing you're doing, and what can we expect?
Mm-hmm. First of all, Austin is a great place. San Francisco is great as well, don't get me wrong. I love to be here. It's a great city, but also Austin is very, very similar. It's a great tech-driven environment over there. First time when I put my feet on the ground in Austin, I was really in love with Austin directly. Great restaurants, vibrant music scene. Lots of students, great barbecue. I love barbecue. But we didn't select Austin because I like the city, obviously. But it was really that the city also really welcomed us warmly. I had the pleasure to meet the governor of Texas as well as the mayor very early on. And we really felt welcomed. And that is very important, that we don't push technology in those markets, but we really integrate it in the communities. And we feel welcomed and really integrated because only when public trust is there and when we can really integrate it in the communities, only then technology is working. So Austin was the choice that we are really having a great blueprint. So we are still in the development phase. We are operating our vehicles, a fleet of vehicles in Austin, still with safety drivers behind the wheel, so we are not yet commercial. We are really in the development phase. And we are operating the vehicles daily with our safety drivers, and we are really bringing it to a point where we can go driverless, hopefully soon. And what is also important, of course, to make sure that we are in an environment where we can see all the different traffic scenarios that we want to test on in the area. And Austin is a great blueprint here. Therefore, this is what we are really doing, trying to leverage the tech talent, trying to leverage the city of Austin to develop the technology to a point to go driverless.
Mm-hmm. And how can we picture that in Austin? Because you mentioned at some point you want to remove the driver. Will you then, will Volkswagen and DMT really interact directly with the customers, with all the customer acquisition, booking, et cetera, or would you seek for collaborations to make this happen and something more holistic?
No, we see ourselves as partner for businesses. As I introduced already, of course, we want to bring the vehicle with the technology integrated end-to-end as a product, but also the software platform. Mm-hmm. But we are not planning to offer those services directly to the customer, but we are really a business partner where we then bring the vehicle together with the platform to the customers to operate fleets. Mm-hmm. And to bring the services to the end rider in the end. We have that in the back of our mind. We have some experience in Germany, particularly, really bringing services to end customers, but we don't plan to offer an own service here in the US.
Mm-hmm, I see. So you mentioned Germany right now. Is there, did you bring some kind of learnings from development from there, from deployment? Have you, like, are you still interacting with them? What's kind of the exchange that happened between what's happening in Germany and here? And
I personally, of course, bring lots of German experience because I lived there since a long time. So it's always in my DNA, of course. So I was grown up there. All what my fellow speakers talked about today, multimodality, public transport, biking, walking was pretty much what I learned from the childhood, really leveraging all the different modes of transport here. So of course I bring that personally in my DNA, but also we as a company, we are having some experience in the ride pooling space. Not sure who is really familiar with ride pooling here in the US or who has ever been in Germany using ride pooling services. We have a company in Germany called Moja. They are really doing great stuff because they are trying to pool different parties in one vehicle. So what we talked about today a little bit, trying to not have one single person in a vehicle, but really making sure that different parties that have same origin, same destination, same routes, that we can pool them together to reduce traffic here. And the company Moja in Germany is operating such kind of commercial service already. It's a manual-driven commercial service, but of course it's the target to also introduce the ID. Buzz AD in those services, and I think that's a really great technology, and we also leverage that experience for our future software platform to make sure that we can bring that experience to our future market here in the US as well.
Mm-hmm, I see. So speaking of that, like of the US market, if there's like specific problems you think this type of vehicle could solve in priority, like that it's exactly best suited for?
Well, I don't think it's best suited for just one experience. Maybe let me start with my personal transition here from Germany to the US, because that was kind of a shock for me as well. Back in Germany, I was owning one car, lots of bikes, of course. My kids were walking to school in the morning. They biked to soccer in the afternoon. So all of that was pretty common to us in Germany. Then I transitioned here. Surprise! No public transport around me, and I'm living in the Bay Area. And it's really a very highly populated area here, but you really lack public transport. So for me, in my today's day, for example, I started this morning very early in the morning. As I work with Germany, I had to go to office to Belmont. Starting in Mountain View, where I live, the train is around 2 to 3 miles away, so no way to get there in the morning before 6 a.m. other than by car. Then I go to the office. Again, the train station is like 1 mile away, and there's no public transport to our office, so I either walk or bike, I don't know. And then I had to come here. Well, again, back to the train station, drove the train. I didn't do it, to be honest, so I took my car this morning. Everything is really car-centric here. Roads are wide, you drive everywhere. We have 2 cars now, and we utilize them every single day to bring the kids wherever they have to go to the supermarket. We rarely walk or bike for our daily duties. And that's the biggest difference here between Europe and the US. And therefore, I think it's pretty obvious where mobility gaps here in the US are. Everyone is driving themselves in cars. And while you already have a very mature ride-hailing network with Uber and Lyft, and now here also Waymo, still lots of ways in your daily life cannot be really covered with that services, and therefore really increasing that availability and utilization of such kind of shared asset rights, be it shared rights in terms of pooling or just sharing the assets, will really increase your daily experience with such kind of transport needs. And this is, I think, the gap that needs to be closed here. So it's not too much closing gaps, but really transforming the way the people are moving here in the US, rather than going by car everywhere, trying to share and trying to really introduce a new mode of transport that is serving the community needs everywhere in the US.
Yeah, I can see that. So if I go back a bit to my introduction and my excitement to have you here on stage, being from the Volkswagen huge family. So it was also mentioned by Charlotte before, the topic of scaling. So it's a topic that I've been also following and see how new players can reach scale and really start the business becomes to be very viable as an OEM, and not any OEM. I mean, the numbers of cars produced by Volkswagen are just so impressive. You're used to big volumes. So what's your vision to go from more pilot to mass development, mass deployment?
Yeah, sure. We of course have scale in the back of our mind. We started the program not to end with a small pilot or just with a few vehicles on the road. We really started the program with scale in the back of our mind. At the same time, we don't want to overpace, of course. I introduced already, we are still in the development phase. It will take some time to really test the technology to make sure it's safe to go. But the vehicle is designed and developed in a way that we can integrate the production on our standard ID. Buzz production lines. So the target here really is to be able to produce thousands of cars on a daily basis here in our production plant in Germany, which is our end goal, of course, but we have to make sure that we are moving at the speed of trust here, not overpacing again. But the vehicle is built in that way that we can really come to those scales in a standard OEM production line.
I see. So what would you need for all of that to happen really concretely? Meaning, you probably need, is there more regulations that you think, or some type of regulations that is needed? You think there is on the demand side, on the funding side, again, the partnerships, which was my topic. How do you see these different blocks kind of putting together to help you in your
I think
vision?
most important here is to think about integration in the communities. So it's customer adoption, which we have to achieve here as the industry jointly. So it's really about the industry shaping that new form of mobility. And this is, I think, the most important piece we have to do right here, and not destroying trust, but really moving at a speed where communities can also absorb that new form of transportation. It's scary when you're first time in an autonomous vehicle. It's scary for everyone. I get lots of visitors from Germany, which we bring to San Francisco and put them in Waymo vehicles just to get used to that technology. And everyone is scared before, but then, after a couple of rides, usually you adopt to that technology, and you have to see it with your eyes. And this is something you really have to get right in every single community you're getting in. Be it here in the US and Germany or anywhere over the world, people have to perceive the technology as a benefit and not a threat. This is really important to make sure that this is happening. But all the other things you talked about, of course, are important as well. Regulation is a huge thing for us, especially as we want to bring technology not only to the US, where you have a super fragmented framework. Maybe we get to a federal framework yet soon, but every single state, or sometimes even on city level, you have certain regulations you have to fulfill, so we have to keep them all on the radar. Europe is a little bit more centric, where we have a very centralized regulation, which is then adopted by the different countries. But it's lots. Like, you have to really take care about lots of different regulations and requirements here. And to have a unified approach would, of course, help us. At the same time, we can also handle different regulations as a big OEM. We know how it is. We are selling our cars in many different countries. So it's something we can handle. So that's not the biggest hurdle. It's a hurdle for sure, but it's not the biggest one. And demand will be there. I trust demand will be there. Once we can really bring those services to the people, it will be adopted. If we are really making sure that people are trusting it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which the company has been working on that on so many levels already.
Sure.
So, yeah, we are approaching the end of this fireside chat. I have, as a last question, actually, I would like to bring back, and it will be a transition to our last speaker of today, since it's University of San Francisco hosting this event. What would you tell students and young generation? And we have this media booth. I really hope everybody recorded a small message for the, let's say, the younger community, and avoid like this expert talking to expert, etc. So what would you tell the younger people? What would you tell students who are future professionals that will enter the market? So whatever you think in this direction of talking to younger generation, thinking of mobility, thinking of technology, etc. So what would be your advice and the word you would give them? Or even from a professional point of view? And
I think someone said it earlier, I don't remember who it was, but I think it's really important to think transportation and mobility holistically. It's not about only bringing one mode and being successful as Volkswagen here, bring autonomous driving. It's really about a transportation system which we have to get right. And therefore also students and everyone who's working in that industry should have that in the back of their mind, to make sure that AVs are integrated in a mobility system. Buses are super important. Buses are great, as long as you can pool enough people on the same route. Bicycles are great. You have to really think it holistically. How can you really transform the mobility landscape to a place where it's sustainable, where it's shared, where you can really serve mobility needs in communities and don't own cars? I'm German. I love driving. I love cars, sure. At the same time, it's not the best answer to all your transportation needs. And it's about having the variety of options available at the time you need it. That would be my advice. And think of it holistically and creatively.
Nice, very nice. And I suppose you have some internships and some openings in your company, so students should also check more into details. But thank you very much for this discussion. I really like it. I can't wait to try the ID.Buzz autonomous.
You have to come to us then.
I will, and everybody should come. Thank you so much, Catherine. Thanks. Yeah, and a little gift from our side already.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you. Wow, that has been a very, very rich event. I hope you really enjoy the afternoon with us. Personally, I like this compact format, so please give us your feedback if you also like it to have over an afternoon. I think it's a nice way to end the week. But we are not done yet. We have still someone to welcome on stage. And if you remember the beginning of the symposium, so we started at a very, very high level of transportation, exploring what technology means in our life, etc. And throughout the afternoon, we were digging more and more into details, into the safety aspect, into the sustainability just now, into some very precise products that we have seen and vehicles that we have seen. But now I suggest that we zoom out again, so that we take a little bit of distance, and that we reflect, that we synthesize, and we reconnect the dots on everything that have been told this afternoon. And our final speaker is someone uniquely skilled at doing exactly that. And I'm very happy to welcome on stage Michael Goldman, who is professor and associate dean at the University of San Francisco. So welcome on stage.
Thanks, Adrienne. Thank you. All right, good afternoon. Uh-oh, we're still there? All right, good afternoon. 353 years ago, in Beijing, a Flemish Jesuit missionary, Ferdinand Verbiest, is said to have invented the first steam-powered automobile, more than 200 years before Benz and Daimler patented their gas-powered version in Germany. To be fair, Verbiest's version, his invention, was about 25 inches long, couldn't carry a human being, and was designed for the amusement of the 17-year-old emperor at that time, Kangxi. So perhaps a very early version of some of what we've heard about today, a little bit different. But that's a little bit of the tradition that the University of San Francisco, a 160-year-old institution that is part and parcel of San Francisco, and our students and alumni, that's the traditions that we bring to the conversation. And what a conversation it's been. Today has given us a sense of the present and the future, and I wanted to connect the past with the present and the future. A couple of things jumped out to me, and I hope these are helpful as you think about what are your key takeaways from today. I was struck by the new research and the innovative practices related to sustainability and technology, and that combination of sustainability and technology, which echoes a lot of the work that we're hearing from our students and faculty this semester in our programs around engineering, design, energy, environmental science, policy, and data science. And those combinations of those issues. We talk a lot at the university about interdisciplinary. We saw it here on stage, I think, today. So that's what struck me. What struck you? What were some of the key insights from the conversations today that you're walking away with? And so I was given a mic, and I was given the opportunity to turn the house lights a little bit up so you can see each other. So, what insights struck you? What are some of your big takeaways? You want to grab this from me? All right, there we go. Billy wants to do some work. What insights struck you? Over there. All right.
Am I allowed? Since I was
Yeah.
I was so happy to hear that many of us mentioned the necessity of collaboration between the city and the private, so public and private sector. To me, that is, I'm so happy to hear that.
To partnerships? Yep.
Okay, Jerry.
And I just build on that because it's also the interdisciplinary nature, that it's the engineers, it's the urban designers, land use planners, and everybody else. We're no longer operating in silos.
So partnerships not just on the outside, but partnerships internally, right? How do we get these different pieces of the machine, as it were, to work together?
Creativity, so rethinking how we move around, what our cars look like. The Zeekr vehicle was a great example. Jet skiing to work across the bay.
Sounds like a good idea.
More compact cars, sharing, pooling. So just really rethinking and breaking where we've come from.
And Kathy Gabor, Associate Dean for our Arts and Humanities, will, I'm sure, remind us all over coffee or a drink later about the importance of art and science. Right, the College of Arts and Sciences. That's really what we're about, is bringing those pieces together and seeing the same thing from very different angles. Right, creativity is about the stuff that already exists and looking at things differently, not necessarily creating new, right? But finding new in what we have and looking at it in a very different way.
I think that's the perfect transition for what I was going to say. As someone not in the industry, all of the people on stage obviously converted to the values of thinking outside the box that we currently live in, but how do we convert more? How do we communicate in a way that more people will understand the values of trying autonomous vehicles or electric vehicles or anything different than what they already do? And so exciting to hear the ways that you are speaking on that.
Excellent. Any final thoughts in the front here?
I think we have three
and
more
at the back.
Yeah. Okay. Welcome, Mike.
Give Billy his exercise for the day. And you've got all these.
Make you run. Okay. One key thing I thought was quite interesting, and it came up several times, is the multimodal approach. Not just one single modality that takes over the rest. and the necessity behind it to have also multi-stakeholder approach in order to have that balance where each mode brings its own contribution and in coherence with the rest of the modes. So.
And not or. So this idea of collaboration, partnership, and I know in a competitive corporate environment sometimes we think about winners versus losers, right? I thought it was really interesting. I heard today not just about the size of the piece of the pie, but growing the pie. Right? How do we think about that in terms of inclusiveness, in terms of access, right? And for USF, about the common good, right? Who's being left behind? Who's being excluded? How do we make sure that we're fully conscious, right, of that social element that was part of a lot of the conversation today? Where's the microphone?
So echoing that, starting with Kristen, I think all the way through, innovating our measures of success. So traditional measures we've had, like vehicle miles traveled or human vehicle miles, we need to think about what is measuring that particular metric, gain and cost us, and that's a trick with the public-private partnerships as well, as we heard from San Mateo County, where you have grants that depend on certain types of measures for success. So we need to innovate those and align them.
Okay. Do we have time for, we got one more? Right at the back?
Sure.
One more.
I'll just go loud.
I can't hear you, sorry, what?
It was heartening to hear more conversation on the importance of land use. Thank you, Jerry, there.
Speaking of the mic.
I'm speaking. However, no one, I might be off, but this seems to happen in a lot of transportation events. None of us are land use people. None of us are real estate developers. How do we get them involved? So the importance is recognized. Nothing is going to happen unless we actually work with those people.
Yeah, who's not in the conversation?
And
Who needs
Michael,
to be in the conversation?
Michael, this is a really important gentleman here. This gentleman's been in every one of our autonomous vehicles in the city.
Very good.
I think my comment also is a little bit to that topic of who's not in the room. I felt that we heard very much across the innovative transportation industry that there is great eagerness to be partnering and to be moving much more in the direction of public-private partnership. I think the public side, the governmental side, is much more hesitant or doesn't have that feeling of how to reach out and actively partner. There's a strong sense of a need to regulate, but not that partnership drive of really bringing this forward and moving it forward. And I really hope that at future conferences, we can start to see a broad range of levels of government involvement and really be encouraging that side of the active partnership to lead to the scaling that everybody is so eager to see.
Well done. You use the phrase lead, right? And I think that's a really interesting challenge. One of the challenges for us as we head out to a couple of drinks or head out to the Embarcadero and walk around in our city is who's going to lead, right? And how do we collaboratively lead? How do we collectively lead? How do we build these partnerships so we're moving in the same direction, right? If not us, who?
6, 7, 8, 9.
Right? And yes, there are people who may not be in the room, and we need to think about who's being excluded. But if not us, who? And if not when, now? So it really is a call to action, right, about collective leadership around these questions.
Daniel, the room compares.
I'm hearing more voices from somewhere. All right. So those were some of the ideas that I think have been triggered for you and for me from the conversation. And those ideas have really been created by the conversation on stage. And so I want to invite you to give a round of applause to all our speakers today who I think have given us so much challenge, so much food for thought, and so many great examples to take back to the office and to our families and to the dining room tables that we're involved in. But also the sponsors, as Billy did up front. I want to recognize Waymo, Path, Map, and eSpace Mobilities, and thank them for really helping make the day together great. So please thank them for their work. The University of San Francisco's classroom is the city. and we are part of the city, and keeping the city moving and keeping us moving in the city is a critical component of that. Just like our conversations today, our world-class students, some of which you've met in the room and outside, I hope, are reimagining the technologies, the policies, the innovations that our companies and society need in order to move forward. Been around here for 160 years, really working every day to think about the next 160 years, and very keen to partner with you to do that. So I hope you've had a chance to talk to some of our team during the day. If not, please do that over a drink and continue the conversation. And we invite you to partner with us to help build that future over the next 160 years, especially around this question. Billy Riggs has written extensively about the need to integrate environmental and social challenges and to restore, as he says, the environmental sanctity and social justice of our cities. There's a phrase. Today's program perfectly demonstrated this integration and deepened Henriette and Billy's contribution to these important questions. So please join me in thanking Billy and Henriette for their leadership of today. And so with that, I want to hand back to Billy to wrap us up for the day.
I think I want to reiterate, first and foremost, the fact that I do not do this alone. And I guess I would say that University of San Francisco, I cannot do this without a team. And, I think, it's people like our staff, it's people like leadership like Michael. It's, we had an amazing president that just retired, Father Paul Fitzgerald, that when I came to University of San Francisco, supported me from day one. It's hard to see him retire, to be honest. He was just encouraging me from day one being on this campus. So I just have to say, I've been supported from the moment I came to this campus with hosting this event, and I was recruited to come here with this event being a part of my identity on this campus, and with companies like Waymo and Cruise supporting this with their money from day one. So I thank you to the industries and this city and this campus for being a part of my career, but also to this institution for supporting me in that mission towards sustainability and social justice, but also supporting movement in this city that I think grows, our global movement towards sustainable mobility and social justice. Thank you for being here. And one more big announcement. Actually, next year is our 10th anniversary, and it is 100 years of the College of Arts and Sciences. So we will be celebrating a lot. So we'll be doing some special stuff. So just be prepared for something mid to late April, early May. We'll be making some announcements. We look forward to hosting you. Again, thanks for being here, and we'll look forward to seeing you again next year. Thank you.